The situation in Iraq is unacceptable to the American people, and it is unacceptable to me. Around half the troops he's requested have arrived on the scene. These troops are all aimed at helping this Iraqi government find the breathing space necessary to do what the people want them to do.
Mazin, brother, it's so good to see you here in Charger Land, right?
Yes.
We're at Fort Cavazos, formerly known as Fort Hood, Texas. Yeah, thanks for making the journey, man. This is one of the highlights. So I appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Bobby. I appreciate it. Good seeing you. And again, appreciate all what you're doing for all of us and many people before and after us. This is big, and what you're doing is just one of a kind act. So we appreciate you having me as part of this interview process.
Yeah, it's your story is so special. It's great that again you're just part of this, and don't want to steal any thunder from me, but the journey from where you came and now you're serving as a commissioned officer in the United States Army,
Yeah.
and you're at what, a captain now?
Captain, yes.
You're a captain,
Yes.
and if you can, I guess before we jump into the current state, because that's pretty awesome in itself, let's go back. So Mozan was a interpreter for the MIT team during our 0608 deployment in Baqubah. And you specifically worked for the Alamo team, right? The
Right.
MIT team, the mighty Alamo,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that's where I had met you initially, and then of course at the reunions and what have you. And such a compelling story, and to take a minute and just put it out there and capture it is going to inspire people on so many different levels.
Thank you,
So
Bob.
with that, hey, if we can, a little bit about yourself growing up,
Sure.
and we'll take it from there. We'll kind of freestyle from there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I was born and raised in Iraq. Never really thought I will, leave the country at some point, but, grew up. So I was born in 82, and, obviously during the Saddam regime, I was there. That was a lot of my childhood, experienced the first Desert Storm as a young kid, 8-9 years old. And then obviously the 90s with a lot of the economic sanctions on Iraq and the regime really tightening up on the society, and going through all of that, all the way until, the 2000s when, I was in college by the time the 2003 war kicked off.
Okay.
So yeah, high school, went to college there as a veterinarian. So I went to veterinarian school in Iraq from 2000 to around 2005. Finished college, and then just my family was just some probably not even middle class family, but I feel like almost everybody was in that class during Saddam's regime. I mean, there was a huge gap. You're either on his top list and you lived well economically and whatnot, and or you're just the other group of people that kind of suffered and just lived that life.
What did your dad do for a living?
So my dad taught in both college and high school. So he majored in psychology, and but he had challenges, especially like I want to say mid '80s all the way until the regime changed in 2003. He was always opposed to the regime, and because of that, they limit you. I mean, they put you out of job. I mean, if you're lucky and you're still alive, the biggest consequences will be you're just out of job.
Now, how did they know he was opposed to the regime? I'm sure that was something like you
Yeah.
didn't really publicize a whole lot.
No. So prior to Saddam taking over in '78, the Ba'ath Party was still kind of it's out there, but they're not the dominant, if you will. So anybody who was not on their side at the time was afterwards, after the '78, when Saddam took over, was somewhat considered that, hey, you're opposing
Okay.
to us. It doesn't matter what your belief or political party or motive was. If you didn't believe in them prior to '78, you were already marked as you're against them. But then even more, I think after that, a lot of people just really, I mean, especially like people from my father's generation, they take pride in not changing their mindset about, the regime or the government.
Right.
And he just was, I mean, he was just outspoken, and, he will say things and whatever. And, he was put in prison for some time, like thousands others. Luckily, he was released after. I mean, he's gone through a lot through his time with them. But I think the none of those really, in my opinion, for that generation at least, or really any honorable man, none of those will really impact you as much as they take the pride away from you. Pride of being a teacher, being whoever you are, right?
Yeah.
A father. So those were more hurtful than him being in a prison for political reasons because he opposed them or whatever.
Wow.
So he's gone through a lot with them, and as he grew his family and had more kids, and that kind of he started worrying or being a little bit more conservative about being opinionated about the government, at least not in public,
Yeah.
just to survive and keep the family alive. And yeah.
Now, do you excuse me? Do you remember the Desert Storm?
I do.
What was the impact with what happened then? What was the talk around the dinner table at that time?
Yeah, I think from one perspective it was similar to 2003. We, as Iraqis, were ready for a change, but we didn't know what to expect. Our biggest worry was, and it's identical to 2003 experience in both. Nobody was worried about what the Americans were going to do. Everyone was worried about what Saddam will do. And he did exact same thing both times. He had artillery and other military units embedded or kind of in between the neighborhoods, and where they basically used the civilians as shields, right? That's his tactic, and that's what we were worried about. I think the other aspect of it in Desert Storm, the Iraqis probably believed a little bit more that he had weapons of mass destruction, and he could probably just go all out on everybody. In
Now,
2003, not as much.
Were you guys aware of what happened with the Kurds up north?
Oh yeah.
You
yeah.
were.
Yeah, we
Okay.
were. Yeah, everyone was aware of what he did up north. But again, we thought, hey, look, maybe he will trap the coalition forces into Iraq and then just put out whatever he's got as far as weapons. So we didn't really know what to expect. I think one thing I always talk about with Desert Storm, it was believe it or not, 13, 14 years later, it had an impact on the 2003 and how people in Iraq perceived that war, because they learned a tough lesson. The ones that, and I've had relatives that were, killed or executed because they decided to rise against Saddam, because the troops made it about halfway through the south, the U.S. troops, and then they pulled back. So yeah, any of those cities where we saw Americans, people were like, yeah, let's go. So they decided to rise with the Americans. And when the Americans left, guess who stayed behind and got executed? Yeah, houses were just flattened, people were executed, and so on. So fast forward 2003, that added a lot of kind of like, the worry to
some hesitation, are we going to be in it?
Yeah, exactly. So that was a lot of the Desert Storm. And then, yeah, I mean, just going through it as a child, hearing the bombings and everything else. And he definitely put fear in our heads about what's going to happen. And yeah.
So when 2003 came, and next thing you know, the American forces aren't leaving.
Yeah.
How old were you then?
So 18, 24.
24 years old. You had already finished college. Yeah. Americans are making good on their promise with regime change. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the capture of Saddam, when that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I guess even before his capture, I think what I remember is a lot of people, even though we had, the U.S. forces on the ground in our cities, and we saw indications that, the government is fallen, the regime is falling, people wanted to wait until Baghdad was under control. So a lot of people from the south waited. Obviously the north is a little bit different. Kurdistan is, different story, but the south, where both of our kind of main efforts, as far as U.S. forces came through the south for the most part. And that's when a lot of those cities, the people who lived there, wanted to wait and see what happens in Baghdad. I will never forget, I remember seeing the very first American helicopter, just from distance, seeing it. And it was just like tears, man. It's just happiness. People were ready for that change. But we also hesitated because he had his people everywhere. Yeah. I mean, Bobby, we're talking about as a kid in the 90s, they used to come in and inspect our houses once a month. And if they inspected for anything, weapons, any propaganda, anything that indicates that you're not in support of the regime. But one of them was that if they walked into your living room and there was no picture of him on the walls, the whole family is gone. So we literally, as kids, I'm not even exaggerating, as kids playing soccer out in the streets, when we see, his bath party, minions come around and we know that that's the time for them to come do it, we run inside and hang up his picture. And as soon as it's done, we take it down. I mean, it's just the life we lived it. And, and instilling fear in people's minds. Yeah. You couldn't even trust your own
who's
family.
Talking, who's aligned with your beliefs, who's not aligned with your beliefs.
You don't know who's compromised, who's gonna tell on you. So and that was going on for decades, right? Like he's 78 until 2003. That was a long time. So anyways, 2003, I remember seeing the very first helicopter from distance. Never forget it. Just happiness. But you're worried about even showing your emotions. And some people are celebrating and they're like, yep, no, it's done. Some people are hesitated. And I understood both. About 4 or 5 weeks before the 2003 actual invasion, he brought in buses loaded with people from different countries, Syria, Egypt, Jordan. Those were his fighters. Those were the people that fought against us later in 2007, and they put up hours of fight instead of just shooting one magazines of AK-47 because they're mad at us and they leave. Those are not believers of the fight. He brought in those from different countries to fight for him because he was funding them for years. He took care of them more than he took care of his own people. I had Jordanian students with me in college. They had better living conditions, better funding. They got everything for free versus me, who was from Iraq, and I wasn't really being taken care of. I had to work hard to be able to sustain myself in college. So those people were ready to fight and die for
'Cause,
him.
yeah, he was buying their loyalty, right?
Absolutely, yeah, they were dying for him, and we rejected them. And as soon as we saw a glimpse of freedom, of hope that the troops are actually on the ground, these people had no safe haven. I mean, nobody allowed them to come into their houses. They were trying to hide everywhere once they realized that they lost the fight. And people just got like, no, man, you picked your fight, you go fight it. So that was going on too. And then, like I said, 2003 comes around, and people were hesitating, but eventually, the more cities that were under control, and as they got my hometown is it's the I guess the closest to Baghdad to the south, on the Tigris, not the Euphrates side. It's called Kut, Kut. And once they passed Kut, I mean, they're right there, the gates of Baghdad, and so once our hometown was under control, we felt very comfortable that okay, this is done deal. Yeah.
Indicators of the regime fallen. What were some of those indicators? Just were you guys watching CNN like everyone else?
No, we didn't have that.
Or
We didn't
was
have.
it just straight like word of mouth from other?
It's word of mouth, and the problem is that he controlled the narrative. So he had us very much locked in a box for as long as he was in control. We didn't have any other TV channels or anything. It was like two TV channels that broadcasted his propaganda and glorifying him about 90% of the time. And so we didn't really have exposure to the outside of what was happening. I mean, you remember his secretary of press was like our tanks was like just across the Tigris from him.
Yeah,
and
nothing to see here.
Yeah, and this idiot is just standing there lying to the people. But it was just word of mouth, like you said. People, the word travels fast, and we were just hearing about, Baghdad is falling, and yeah, so that was really it. And then even at the local level, we were kind of judging based on, knowing his kind of like big leaders in each city, and if they are and kind of like they fled, or they hiding, or they were killed, or whatever, you can tell like, hey, if those names are fallen, then it's clearly
Okay.
bigger than the troops are committed to it.
So, I mean, obviously it wasn't all rainbows and unicorns living underneath Saddam. But what was some of the fond memories you had growing up in Iraq that was controlled by the Ba'ath Party and Saddam Hussein? But you're still kids. You're still out there,
Yeah.
doing soccer and playing. And
Right.
what's some of the highlights of growing up?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, like any other kid, just having those childhood memories definitely wasn't, social media generation. So it's definitely different.
Yeah.
We enjoyed being out there and playing and doing the things. I think just learning how to, I don't know if you consider it fun, but really learning how to be part of the family at a very young age. To me, I think that, it doesn't matter what you call it, but it prepared me to be better adult later. Taking on responsibilities from a very young age, whether it's working at age 8 and 9. And I'm talking like,
what did you do at?
I don't know, what did I not do? I mean, I'm telling you, I remember my mom comes out, I think I was 11, and I was working in kind of construction job. People are trying to build house, and they have some, construction material, and they want people to move it, and we will go and move it and make whatever money we can, just to help the family, because you watch your dad, who was successful academically and well respected in the city, and now he's working as a, with all due respect to that job, but he's working as a taxi driver, in a car that is barely moving around. And so having to be part of that family, part of that struggle, as just like we where we experience in combat, the tough times bring us together, and being part of that was, but despite all of that pain, we were having fun with it, because I remember, like, now reflecting back on it, my mom will come out and yell at me. She's like, I told you, you're not doing construction. You can go pick a different job or whatever. And I'll sneak out and go do a different job. And, I remember like just everything, man. I mean, I can name one after another. Working at a carpenter's shop and a ice cream place, you know, selling watermelons at the big, like at the corner of our neighborhood, whatever you name it. You know, we did it at a different age, but we had fun with it too. You know, as kids, as friends, and you know, we had fun with it. All of that while I was playing soccer. You know, obviously that's the prominent sport, but you know, I played it a little bit more aggressively than
I love that you called it soccer.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's yeah. At this point, it's
You've definitely been Americanized.
Yeah,
Sure.
But I played it through high school, college. Obviously, when I moved here, played it for the army for a little bit too. But yeah, I mean, just staying with the sports. You know, being competitive at school despite all of that. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, on that question, at least I remember, I think I was 14 or 15 and I was playing for my city's that age bracket team, and they were doing the tryouts for the national team for that age bracket, and I was invited to the tryouts. They, you know, picked different people, you know, at a young age to go try out, but I think I had one pair of cleats that myself and like two other friends that we were sharing, literally. And
sharing cleats.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I remember got the invite, and I was like, I mean, cloud nine. I was so happy as a young kid. Came in and told my mom, I was like, hey, they invite me to this tryout. It's in this city, about 4 hours, but I'll need to buy like, you know, some equipment and at least something to go try out with. And I had a really good shot at it. And she laughed and she was like, you're out of your mind. What, I mean, have you seen the family? And I was like, I know, but like, this is once in a lifetime. And she's like, okay, well, then what? The problem is like, they were looking at the people ahead of me who made it, let's just say, to the national team. Those people living in fear. He used to put them in jail, torture them if they lost a game, shave their heads, like do all kind of stuff. So they were playing with fear, not fun. So she was like, what are you going to make it for? Even if they pick you for the national team, you're just going to be tortured if your team loses. So there's no point. Everything was driven by the fear that he instilled in us. Yeah. So mixed memories.
Wow. That's absolutely not the way to motivate your players, right?
No, not at all.
When are we gonna lock you up?
Yeah.
Might work for the Dallas Cowboys. Probably have to edit that out. So, English. How did you start to learn English?
Yeah. So the school or the education system in Iraq, it's mandatory, at least during my time, it was mandatory to start learning English at 5th grade. Doesn't matter. You liked it or not. 5th grade, you start learning English. And then by the time you make it to high school, English is always there. So it's the only other language that it was mandatory. Now, if people wanted to go to private school, not that, you know, there were many of them, but if somebody was rich enough to send their kids to some private lessons or schools or whatever, they can choose to learn another language. But by the government, for you to pass each grade, to move on, you need to pass English from 5th grade all the way until high school. And it actually, one of the subjects that you test on at high school, you know, before you go on to college, and, you know, it depends on your score, is what decides which major you're going to have or which college you will join. So it's not like here you can, you know, take, you know, GRE and go get an MBA or whatever. Like, it's more likely your choice. There, it's based on your ranking and your score. So if you score, you know, percentile wise, if you score, say, for example, from 90 to 100 overall, as you graduate high school, then you qualify for School of Pharmacy, Medicine, and whatever, right? 80 to 89, it used to be like the engineering school, maybe law school, whatever. So it depends on where you place, and English is part of it. So that's how I learned at least the basics of it. But beside that, I was always, you know, driven by English. I loved it. I enjoyed it to the day. You know, English versus math, I would pick English any day. I can write any day easier than anything else. So I loved it. And then when I went to college, if you go to anything that is medical related, it's all in English. You don't use Arabic at all. I mean, conversation, sure, but subject wise, you read lectures, everything English. So going to veterinarian school, that kind of enforced it and made it even better.
Did your courses, when you came to America, and you started going to college here,
Yeah.
did a lot of your credits and everything transfer?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
did? Okay.
Yeah, so my degree is academically recognized here as a DVM, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. I just never really went after being licensed to practice.
Okay.
But academically, as a degree, yes, absolutely, it's recognized here. It all translated, and it's all good. Yeah.
So did you have to do some sort of like internship in Iraq after school to working in the veterinarian
Yeah.
field?
Yeah,
did?
you do at least right out the gate. You do a year.
Residency. That's the
Residency.
word I was looking at.
Correct. Yeah. So you do a year of residency, and then from there you start off as general. Not focusing on large versus small animals. Some people decide to go research, and all different pathways. I didn't really. I did my year, but during that year I was literally in and out of being an interpreter at the time.
Oh, you were?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so I started, I want to say, I think my very first time walking into it was Camp Echo in Diwania, just west of Scania Highway, or that major highway that was going north and south on the Euphrates side. So south of Baghdad, that's where my college was, and there was a base there. And I was in my last year in college when I first went and kind of signed up.
So let's talk about how you got recruited to be an interpreter for the Army.
Yeah.
Uh, how does that happen? Because that's still got to be you. Just based on my own, that's always been very puzzling, because it is like the risk versus reward part. Like how do you? Yeah, how do you make that call, and how do you get recruited and make that decision, and what was that conversation around the dinner table again,
Yeah.
right? Like, hey mom, I think I'm gonna do this. How did that all unfold?
Yeah, well, that didn't go well with my mom. So just to preface that,
Imagine.
I have never really just blatantly disagreed with my mom and walked away from her before that time. At least probably even to the day. I don't just like I respect her and we talk and all that. That was a decision that she directly straight up told me, you're not doing this. Not because her views or anything. It's mostly because of she's worried. She's a mother.
Yeah,
She's
sure.
worried.
Mom.
Yeah. So that's that. But just to back it up a little bit, it's so in my hometown. Until we left Iraq, we've never had conventional units. We've only had Green Berets at Camp Delta. So the Green Berets, the Special Forces teams, the ODA teams, were walking around my city in shorts in 2003. It was safe all the way through probably end of 2003 until things started escalating. But as they were interacting with us, us who knew English, we were happy to help, just out of gratitude to people that came across the globe to come and liberate the country and help us. So I want to say, I don't want to speak for the people, but I want to say majority of people were in awe for this selfless service and gratitude that we owe them. It goes without saying the generosity of that culture. Nobody will ever charge them anything as far as food or money or whatever. But what I could offer is, hey, I speak English. Not everybody in Iraq is as good. Let me at least facilitate that. So it started, I think, with just being out there, out and about, and I'll see the troops. And as you remember, a lot of units showed up to Iraq without linguists, at least not many of them.
Yeah.
And if they were from different countries. There weren't that many of them that were Iraqi, native Iraqis
right.
speaking. So there were Jordanians and Egyptians and whatnot. And even those folks were already living in the U.S. So they've been kind of somewhat disconnected from that culture for a long time. So point being is that there was already an existing gap in the communications between the troops and the locals. And that was on us, in my opinion, at least on us, is to bridge that gap and help them and not let them help on both sides. So that's where the spark started, and I found it more interesting. It's me, I can contribute that way. Now, as things gotten worse and the troops start getting under attack, and hostility increased, I just felt a little bit more committed, and every day I was more and more committed. And again, like you were saying, financially, the reward, I had a good career, was especially as the regime changed, I would have been in a good shape, financially, just to go work as a veterinarian and, continue being successful. Worst case scenario, I can just go academia and go teach in college like my dad did. So I wasn't desperate, in terms of that. It was more of like, hey, these people just came all the way here. They put in their lives online. There are locals that needing help because, you communicate something wrong, somebody get arrested for no reason. You just made more enemies for us. And we'll probably talk about it more. So I became more and more committed that way. I had some friends that graduated college and they were just neighborhood friends. And, they start working as interpreters before me. And as I got into my last year of college, I became more and more interested. I remember one experience, I think that might have been what really kind of pushed me over and just said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. We were in the dorms in college, my very last year in college. I think it was like last semester before graduation. And Camp Echo, where I joined from, was literally like across from the dorms. You can look from the windows and you can see the base. And the Spanish army was in control of that city from Spain. And I think it was Spain and Ukraine a little bit. But anyways, they saw something in the building. I don't know. Somebody shined a flashlight on them, something that triggered them as the convoy was going through. They came through the building, and as you can imagine, I mean, they were triggered. This is early stages of the war. They didn't have a linguist with them for sure because they didn't speak, English to the locals, and barely English. And that night was obviously terrifying. As you can imagine, a lot of families went through that. But me as a grown-up being there, trying to help and speaking with them and calming things down, I was like, I can do this at a bigger scale. Like, who cares about being a veterinarian at this point? Imagine the kids that are being terrified every night. And it's not the soldiers' fault. Soldiers are trying, one, survive and do the right thing and go after the bad guys. So I saw the benefit of that, and that's how I got committed to it, and eventually went and signed up there at that base and started working kind of on and off, like I was saying, until I finished college and residency, because without that residency, my degree would have been kind of like, not completed, quote unquote. So I was on and off, and as soon as I finished it, I was full-time. I couldn't wait to be full-time.
Interesting. So... yeah, money only goes so far, right?
Yeah.
Well, especially when you're getting put in those positions. I
Right.
did some work overseas after the Army, and the money was really good. But when that RPG flies over your head, or indirect fire, it's like you start recalibrating.
Oh, yeah.
The risk versus reward factor again. All right, so you start jumping into this more and more. How much English did you gain? Because I had an interpreter. Well, I had multiple interpreters, but there was this one, and like his lingo, like he got a lot of his English, I think, informal education. One from other GIs, which was interesting, and then two, movies, right?
Right.
Did you watch any like American movies and
Yeah. I mean, movies were there, but I think my English was a lot more formal,
Okay.
very British driven, not necessarily pronunciation wise, but grammar wise, because that's again, that's the education system. The UK and Iraq has had ties for a long time on different fronts, right? Military and education. So it probably would have been easier. I know some friends that went and worked for the Brits, and they found it easier to communicate with them than going in right away with the U.S. forces. But I mean, yeah, sure, I watched movies and all that. The only thing I needed to adjust really is just conversational and picking up the dialects and all of that. But I had grammar wise and all that. Mine was a little bit more formal, but I certainly met others who were like that, and even ones that were with me in Baqubah. They academically English wasn't there, but they listened to music and movies and the GIs, like you said, and they picked it. And at the end of the day, that's how language works, right? I mean, you listen really good, and if I'm communicating with you and I learn how you say things and I'll say it back to you, it makes it easier for both of us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, no, mine was a little bit more formal and school driven.
Did you have a standout American movie growing up that you saw as like, wow?
I mean, I would say a lot of classics, classic movies. Again, he controlled what we can and cannot see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty that we watch. A lot of action movies, whether it's Denzel Washington or Arnold and other movies, things like that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kind of curious, because I know the internet wasn't like a huge thing,
Yeah.
if at all, right?
No,
Like,
we didn't have it at all.
like
We didn't have cell phones, no internet. They would have some movies in theater. You'll go and watch them, and sometimes. So yeah, I mean, just some action movies, and yeah.
Interesting. So, how old were you when you started doing the interpreting full time?
Yeah, around 24. I
24.
want to say, yeah.
And was that for a conventional army unit?
Correct. Yeah, I started off. There was a unit. It was an EOD actually unit, and their mission was to go out east toward the Iraq-Iranian border and clear the landmines that were left over from the 80s war against Iran. At least that was one of their missions, or maybe the primary mission, because a lot of people were still kind of just getting killed by those, ordnance and whatnot. So that was one of their missions. And then I did that with them, I think I want to say just a couple of months, maybe 3 months. And then I quickly, I can't remember how or why I transferred, but I transferred with the mid team that was in charge of doing a lot of the basic trainings for the Iraqi army.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I remember talking to some friends, and it seemed a little bit more interesting because you interact with the Iraqi army and you're teaching them, and they were vetting the interpreters that they were hiring, obviously based on the type of unit. And that unit, because they were doing a lot of lectures and classes, they needed someone who was a little bit more academically English educated.
Yeah.
And the guy who hired me, or not hired me, but recruited me, actually two of them, one of them was killed later, unfortunately. My childhood friend, just 2 houses down from my house. And
How was he killed?
Combat. Yeah, combat. They went after him. I mean, he was coming home, I think, one day, just leaving base, and they took him out.
Really?
Yeah. So it wasn't, I meant combat, like not in the actual mission, but he was vulnerable on his own, leaving. That was the weakness spot, as you know. And but yeah, they took him out there. The other guy actually barely survived. Several times his car got blown up and whatnot. And but both were graduates from college who majored in English. So they were with that team, and the team saw the value of having someone like that. So they grabbed me from the EOD unit, and they said, "Hey, I think you'll enjoy this. Come over here, and you'll help us." There was a lot more documents translation than there's definitely conversational and training and whatever, but they need a lot more of developing a curriculum, if you will. So yeah, I joined the mid team there quickly,
Knowing full well that the other guy just was killed.
Oh, no, he was still with us. He got killed later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he got killed later once we were on the same unit. He was killed later.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the risk is there.
Yeah.
When did it really start becoming real? That specific occurrence, or?
So things escalated, I want to say, as you remember, probably early 2004. It depends on what part of the country you want to talk about. I mean, the way the threat evolved with us, going from 160 millimeter round being an actual IED to later the 155s and EFPs and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So seeing that, transition between what they did with us. I want to say 2004, early 2004
Okay.
is when I would consider that things start escalating. I think 2004 for me individually is when I transitioned. So that same mid team got tagged to go up north, just south of Baqubah, where the brick factories were. That city in Nahrawan, that's what it was called. And we were the very first unit, U.S. forces unit, to set a foot in that city.
Wow.
And so I remember driving through that city was just an eye-opening for, obviously the regime has been gone for months by now, but nobody has gone there. And, the enemy definitely took advantage of that vacuum and that safe haven for them. And so my team got tagged to go up there and do 45 days rotations back and forth. But let me back it up one time. Right before that, there was an election that was supposed to happen, or happened actually. And the team said there was 6 of us interpreters, and they
Was
said,
this the national elections
I
where
think so.
everybody had purple fingers?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was that. Either the national or the city level. But it required the team to go to Hilla province, where Babylon is. So that's about 3 hours from my hometown. And all the linguists or the interpreters that were with me, they were all from my hometown. And nobody wanted to travel. They're like, no, this is not what we signed up for. Some of them were going back and forth every day. It was still safe, convenient for them. So same day commute, they go back and forth. And all of a sudden, the unit is asking them to go for a 45-day mission in a different city. And they're like, whoa, this is not what I'm doing. That's when I think a lot of, the motives will start playing a role in why you're doing this role for, right? And not demeaning any motive, but it started making a difference. So I was the only linguist that volunteered to go with the unit out of 6.
Wow.
Went with them, did the mission, came back. But that also built that trust and the bond with my team.
Yeah.
Not to put the other people down. Again, I respect everyone's decision.
Sure.
But I was committed. I was like, yeah, put me to work. Let's go. So we go there, take care of the mission, do the election. We come back. And then next thing you know, they tagged the unit to go to that city, south of Baqubah. Now, the other people, they were like, we're absolutely not going. This is straight up combat. They know the ethnicity difference and the sectarian challenges in that area. And they're like, we're not going. So the team ended up saying, basically, I went, and again, the only one, went up with them the first 45 days. Halfway through the 45, we made a run down back south to pick up some supplies. But these people were they're getting paid, and they were just sitting at base. And I was out there. We were already getting attacked and getting blown up almost twice a week.
So what kind of unit is this? Is it an infantry?
This was a mid team. This was a mid team.
A mid team.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was a mid team.
And that's usually a mixed bag of experiences, right? Infantry, artillery.
Correct. Supply.
Yep. And you guys were in up armored Humvees?
Not at that time. We didn't have I think we had the very first gen of not the paper thin ones. So we went from sandbags with no doors and then a thin paper doors into the very first gen of it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was around that time when we were transitioning to a little bit more, but when we rolled into that city, we had the very basic armor. I mean, nothing, probably, not much.
So for the people that don't know what a MIT team is, how many officers and NCOs are inside a MIT team?
Yeah, that typical. So it's about 10 to 12 people total. Depends on how they staff them before they deploy them. But 4 NCOs maybe on average. I would say just seeing different MIT teams, 4 maybe 5 at most NCOs. The rest are officers, and like you said, it's a mix of different specialties. And their primary role is to partner and integrate themselves with an Iraqi unit, guide them, develop them, and just kind of do the missions with them.
So you guys are rolling up there. You're embedded with the MIT team, and you're their interpreter for the Iraqi army unit that's also going up there.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So was that a company that your MIT team was assigned to, or was it a battalion?
Battalion. And it was actually the same battalion that we will talk about later, the same ones that stayed with us in Baqubah.
It is?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the same battalion. I started with them when they were building up from basic training. And I was the only one who went up with them up north to Narawan, to that city. And then later when they got tagged to go to Baqubah, to Fob Gabe, I was still with them. So they definitely viewed me differently than any other linguist that could connect with them.
So Baqubah, what was the word on the street with Baqubah? Outside of you having to go up there and the guys not being able to commute, your fellow interpreters, what was the word on the street when you guys were going up there? Was it because
Combat. I mean, everybody knew it was gonna be a fight.
It was going to be a fight.
It was gonna be a fight. You know, it's just, again, that's when you start running into like the blurred lines of ethnicities and religion beliefs and whatever, right? Like South versus West and a little bit of the East. Baqubah is, as you know, it's a mix of both. They had both.
Yeah.
Which I think it's a beauty thing to have, you know, diversity and all that. But we knew that, at least, you know, we as the interpreters, everybody knew that this is not going to be a walk in the park. It's not going to be like my hometown in the South. You know, you can go back and forth home every day. At least at that time, it was safe. So they knew Baqubah would be bad. And sure enough, I mean, I think we got there, and our very first week, we lost the battalion sergeant major. The Iraqi battalion sergeant major got shot with a by a sniper. We lost 2 or 3 other, you know, soldiers that were with him. I was on that mission with him. We started getting blown up left and right every day. But our very first mission, you probably recall it maybe coming up during, you know, the 06-08 deployment, but the brick factory area in the south of Baqubah, that's where that year in 2004, maybe early 2005, they had beheaded like 40 plus people.
Yes.
You probably heard about that story. So that was our unit. That was the very first one. That was the trigger that our unit went there. And I remember the scene. Yeah, so that city just turned on us very quick. Around Detroit, that we were going, it's going east-west, I think. That was a nightmare. I mean, Damon, you know, referenced it, but that was, I mean, it's a guarantee every time you drive on there. It's an IED, it's a firefight, it's something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, there's nobody out there, right?
No.
And no eyes on means you know, it just seems like, yeah, where we weren't, they were.
Yeah.
And it really gave them an advantage, especially out towards the West.
Right.
So you're working with that one unit, and then at some given point they transition out. Is that where were they also Alamo, or
No, their call sign was the Shepherds.
Shepherds?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did the Shepherds, did they switch out with Alamo? Or was there another unit?
They did. They were right before them. Yeah.
Okay.
I did have a short time between the EOD, and then I went, I guess I missed that portion, but I went to Camp Kalsu, southwest of Baghdad, in that triangle of death, quote unquote, area. There was an ODA team there that I went and helped out with. So I kind of jumped around, and eventually the mid team is the one that I stayed with, because again, I felt that I guess the gratification of you're having a value, you know, you're helping the Iraqi army and the locals, and the mission intrigued me. You know, again, I'm helping the military Iraqi personnel. It goes without saying I'm helping the U.S. troops, but you're also going out there and engaging in missions that were very intriguing to me. So I kind of started, yes, with the team. Shepherds were the team before Alamo. And that's how the transition started for even the Iraqi battalion. Initially, it was 45 days mission to go up there and take control of the city. And then they're like, okay, now it's more. Now, okay, you're moving the whole battalion up there. And naturally, by extension, the mid-team had to move up there. That was a turning point for the team, because none of the linguists wanted to go with them anymore, permanently or temporarily. So the team were very upset with that, and rightfully so. They said, hey, look, we can't. Mazin is out there by himself doing every single mission. I mean, talking about lack of sleep, supporting an entire battalion. And not only that, I was actually like, you know, I can't even count them how many times in firefights and IEDs. And so that takes toll. I haven't seen my family in a long time. The only way I can travel out of that AO is on an Iraqi convoy or the mid-team when they go further south, outside of that hot zone. So they came back, and the mid team had a meeting with all the linguists, and I remember that they're like, "Hey, look, we're probably gonna let you go, like fire you. We're probably not gonna even let another unit pick you up because your commitment and you didn't go with us." And that was between them to decide. They proposed a couple other options as far as, hey, look, you pay Mazin. Mazin is gone. I was like, no, we're not doing that. I get paid my own, and money wasn't. I was getting paid. I think at the time it was $500 a month, but I was getting blown up at least on average twice a week. I want to say, at least. Just
Did you get paid in cash?
yeah.
You did.
Yeah, it was cash.
It's straight cash.
Yeah.
500. What was $500 a month? Like, was that some big dollars compared to?
It wasn't big enough to get blown up that many times. I'll tell you that much. I mean, sure. I think the economy was still like struggling, trying. And my family certainly would have benefited from that. But I'm telling you,
especially
like
when the other guys are getting paid $500.
They didn't have nothing to do.
Up, right?
Nothing. Yeah. So the team wasn't happy with that. And sure, the money was okay and good, whatever you want to call it. But the toll and what do you do, and that stays true throughout my whole time being an interpreter there. There was not enough money that L3 or whoever company that was employing me will pay me to make it say, oh, this is worth me going out there and doing this.
Yeah.
Sure, if you were in an office, maybe translating documents or doing some contracts or whatever, absolutely, it's an easy gig. But going out there kicking doors with the troops every day, it's not. It's not. You can't put a price tag on it.
Now, were you carrying a weapon at the same time?
Not right away. I remember it's a funny story that we always remember from. There was an NCO with the Shepherds team. By then, like I was saying, I did the election mission with them. I've gone with them 45 days mission, and now I'm the only one who's committed with them. By then I'm sharing the their living quarters with them, where, as linguists usually were separated. I was one of them because I was the only one. And not even that, I was the only one not from that city. So that adds a different element to you being a linguist from a different city being there. It's a whole different thing. But anyway, so the trust level was already great. The bond was amazing. And I remember one of the NCOs, we were going into a really hot spot. And he said, hey, I'm going to give you my pistol. Here's the holster. Here's the pistol. Just keep it on you just in case, in case you need it. And I was like, okay, sure. We've gone to ranges and everything. So he had no question as far as my integrity or ability to use the weapon or nothing. But that's not everybody on the team, right? Like trust is earned and it comes over time. And some people you just need longer time with them than others. And there's also rules, right? Like we abide by the army rules. Yes, we're in combat, but so anyways, I remember another officer on the team was very triggered and got on him, and he said, hey, you can't give him that. And he was like, this dude is out here with us. And I don't even remember I had a helmet. I didn't have, I had minimal. And he was like, this dude is out here sticking out like a sore thumb with his civilian clothes, didn't have uniform. In some cases.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was like very vulnerable spot for you to be out there. I did have an armor.
So talk about putting a target on your back.
Yeah.
Right?
And so he was kind of advocating saying, hey, he needs a little bit more protection just in case things went south. And, but I remember that story, but it wasn't long enough. It wasn't long after that. When things changed, and definitely as we started engaging more, and the ones that were in doubt or worried about that it just became easy. And because the Iraqi army, I remember the battalion commander told the team, and he said, look, if you don't give him one, I'm giving him one. He can have an AK from me. I don't care. He needs something. And so yeah, I mean, quickly, uniform, everything. And then I think from that point on, I've always had a weapon with me.
Yeah.
I didn't mind having an AK, because I don't want the U.S. soldiers to be in trouble or cause anything or issues for them. So I didn't mind. And the Iraqi army have always given me something.
There's plenty of them around.
Yeah, it's just something to have, and whether you need it or not, it doesn't matter. But I needed a uniform. I needed an armor. We all did as interpreters. And that just came with time and engagements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I know that was kind of a big deal when we, because we didn't give our interpreters my first tour over in Ramadi.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where over time, it was just like, okay, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're out with us. It's one of those things where, yeah, and
Yeah.
it was very well received too.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
all right. So Alamo team, okay, well, Shepherd team, uh, things are starting to pick up. Kinetics, you guys are getting blown up.
Right.
What's your what's the enemies like? Who are you fighting at this time? Are these foreign fighters? Are they locals? Are they, uh, you know,
Yeah.
talk to me about that.
So I think it was both. I think the locals that were like we were saying, I think before the recording, there were some locals that were just pissed off at us because they either were in the former army that we dissolved and now they're upset because we took that honor away from them. So they, in my opinion, they weren't the most aggressive or most devoted to a cause fighters, right? Versus the overseas fighters that I referenced at the beginning. In my opinion, and seeing them in different firefights, those were the ones that you know they were devoted, they were incentivized financially or religiously or whatever it is, but they stood the ground and they fought until they were killed or captured or whatever, right?
So
And we were fighting both mixed.
So those were dudes that were the foreign fighters that we were fighting were guys that were brought in by Saddam
Yeah.
earlier.
Some of them kind of that was a leftover
didn't know
by
that.
him, yeah. And then afterwards, you know, Al-Qaeda and all these other groups
Yeah.
recruited and
Right.
brought them in.
Right.
But yeah, we were fighting both. We knew where some areas like anything north of Route Detroit, which makes it closer to Boris and Baqubah, those were safe havens to some, from at the time what we heard and later found out that some camps, they had some people from Afghanistan there, fighters, you know, from all kind of different countries. Yeah, so we were fighting both and we knew quickly, we learned the difference. But like I said, I mean, I remember the very first IED that we got hit with, it was a 160 millimeter round, and I was with Shepherds and barely did anything to our truck, but it was an IED, quote unquote, right?
Right.
And then you slowly see how, like, we know how they adapt to our TTPs, and you know how we adjust as well, but they watching us. So the 60 millimeter IED might have been just to see how we react and go on. But yeah, that quickly Shepard's team got tagged. I want to say we stayed south for about 6 months or maybe less. I want to say maybe 3 to 6 months, and then they said, okay, you're moving to Baqubah to Fob Gabe. And that was again, that was a turning point to even the Iraqi army, because that entire battalion was from the south, and now they have to move up and fight in a different area.
Yeah.
So we've lost some of them, meaning they just quit. But the majority stayed in, and later I'll probably highlight their devotion to the mission, because a lot of them weren't even getting paid, but they stood the ground and they fought with us.
Wow.
But yeah, so that was a turning point for the battalion, and we moved up, to Gape, and I think it was shortly after where, the Alamo team arrived and they did the switch with the Shepherds.
Wow. What a journey. What a journey.
Yeah.
Okay, so Alamo comes in, they rip out with Team Shepherd. They don't know you from
Right.
anything, right?
Right.
Except what Shepherd shares with them.
Yeah.
I would imagine they had to rely on you quite a bit, though.
Yeah. So a lot of training, as you remember, that we got, or the troops got at Moab Station, before they deploy, that is focused on culture, integration with the locals. In my opinion, having been there in the country, when I received, quote unquote, the troops, I can tell the training wasn't effective. Either the material wasn't updated, or maybe the instructors weren't people who are still connected with the culture there. I quickly recognized that they were being taught things that really made them very nervous, and rightfully so. You're going to combat an area and all that. It goes without saying. If you're not nervous, something is wrong, right? But they didn't really know what to trust and how to recognize it, and that comes with time. So I focused on that a lot. I didn't take anything for granted. Whatever Shepard's team told them, that's on them. That's an added bonus. I earned my trust in my actions every day with them. But they quickly recognized it. The Alamo team got there and they I think at the time we had 4 or 5 interpreters. I was the only one who shared a living quarter with an American soldier. All the other interpreters had their own separate rooms, a little bit of distance from us. And that was actually, during the Shepherd's time, again, I was from a different city. So I hate talking about religion, but I was the only linguist who was, from the South and from a different, focus of Islam versus others, right? I just hate, the making differences, but that was the reality.
No, it
I was an
is.
outsider to that city.
It adds to the complexity of
Right.
just not only the fight, but internal too.
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, so I had to kind of I tried when with the shepherds, I showed up and similar to how I was in the South, everybody with me, the linguists, they were from the hometown. So if we had received somebody from, I don't know, from Erbil up north in Kurdistan, we're gonna be like, okay, why is this guy down here, right? So, I show up to Fob Gabe and everyone in Fob Gabe was from Baqubah, or at least Diyala province, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only one that came from with the battalion, came with that mid team, and they're letting me stay in that room and they watch me carry weapons. So it unfortunately created.
Not all of them were strapped.
No, not at
Okay.
all. So it created preconceived, opinions about me, and as much as I'm very, would think friendly and a very team player and all that, it didn't matter. It created some animosity with other linguists, and at some point, I at least felt there's a safety concern for me. That I was better off, staying closer to the team. So back to Alamo team shows up and they see all the differences and they're like, okay, they learn about the journey. Hey, this guy's been with the Iraqi army. I mean, they go over to the Iraqi side and these people, that battalion, you tell them my name to the day. Some of them are out of the army in Iraq. If you reach out to them and you mention my name, they think the world of me because I was with them through everything. I stood up for them. I helped them. I made sure that they were well understood. And if they were bad, they knew. I called them out. I was like, no, dude, don't, this is bad. Don't lie to them. I'm not going to. So they knew my integrity.
Right.
They seen it in action. I'll call them out. But the battalion loved me. The unit did, and I had a good relationship. And my door was always open to continue those relationships with other linguists if they were, to do so. And it's proven by at least 2 of my closest interpreters came out of Fob Gabe. We were the 3 that were picked out of Gabe to move to the U.S. They became very close to me. And again, going back to that differences in religion or beliefs or whatever, us 3, one of us was a Catholic, from Baghdad. He was with the brigade mid team, Bashar, that was his name. And then the other gentleman, Uthman, that was his name. He was from Baqubah, and he was from the Sunni, belief. And I was from the South, and I was Shia. And all 3 of us to the day, closer than you ever think. We were the 3 that were picked out of Gabe, at least. And we all arrived to the U.S. I mean, the bond is there. You just can't force people to have it. So. Right. Yeah, Alamo team shows up and they quickly recognize that, hey, this guy is valuable.
So a Catholic,
a
Shia, and a Sunni.
Yes, absolutely.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, all 3 of us moved to the U.S. and same week, we arrived different days. But yeah.
So you guys start getting down to business.
Absolutely. Yeah, very quickly. We started getting busy. Our AO was different initially versus what changed to later. We didn't have a lot of business in the city. 4th Battalion did. 4th Battalion, Iraqi Battalion.
Yeah.
4th Iraqi Battalion had the city. We had kind of south and southeast corners toward the brick factory, similar to what we had before, but now we're based out of Gabe. And we still had, a lot of action there too. I mean, I think Damon in his interview referenced a couple of the IED engagements. So I remember one event I want to bring up. When I was still with the Shepherds, we were at the brick factory one time, and there was a intersection right there, and we got hit by indirect fire, mortar rounds. I mean, they were landing right around us. Luckily, we didn't lose anybody. And then 15 minutes later, this tribal sheikh or tribal leader, and his name is Sheikh Atta, Atta, and he was very prominent leader for the enemy groups there. His land back there, I mean, it was a camp. Later, we found out, and we later, the Iraqi army arrested him, and we were there with them. But, months before that, he came out right after the mortar attack, and he was acting like as if he was checking on us, but he wasn't. He was, he was just checked to see if he actually hit the target, right?
Doing some
His people.
BDA,
yeah,
battle damage
exactly.
assessment.
And I still have a picture. I'll probably send it to you if I haven't, but I still have a picture. Me standing in the middle, translating for at the time Lieutenant Colonel Lahardi. He was the Shepherd's commander, and the Sheikh right there. But full circle, months later, Team Alamo engaged and everything. We're on the ground and we're getting pounded by that AO every day, and all the indications, intel, and everything telling us that this dude is hosting, Afghanis fighters, and it's a camp back there. But no one will penetrate that camp because, I mean, it's a dead zone there. So the Iraqi army unit just got fed up with it. I mean, there was a village right behind them, and we got reports and intel about these women and kids were hiding in the bushes because this dude and his people were just machine guns, all across these villages. So the Iraqi army fired up, and they're like, we're going to go up there and pick this guy up. This was Ramadan. And anyways, we go there. We actually get in a firefight and on the way into the village, and then we pulled up to his house after the firefight. And again, he was acting as if it had nothing to do with him. His land was massive, but it's all his land. And I mean, we're talking about these people had dushkas and heavy machine guns set up for us. And so we pulled up, but at the time, the Iraqi battalion, I think we had already transitioned the authority to the Iraqis by then from coalition forces. So it was quote unquote their decision to make, these moves, and we were there just to back them up. So we couldn't really be the ones who decided to pick him up. It had to be them, and the battalion commander was with us, the colonel, and he was like, I don't need you guys help. I'm picking this guy up. It doesn't matter who's behind him. I'm taking him out.
Right.
So, but he didn't do it. And he didn't go in there and rip him out because there was no way we would have left that village alive. He went there and he said, hey, the division commander wants to invite you for the iftar, the meal to break your fast at the division headquarters. And made him feel safe. The guy couldn't reject he probably knew there was something up because they knew, the locals knew about the Iraqi battalion commander. He was very far on the Shia side, like in terms of his mindset. So he was very hardcore in fighting these Sunni groups, probably a little bit more motivated than just his military motive. And the division commander was definitely from that side as well. And that adds complexity to me as a linguist because
right.
these guys, a lot of the Iraqi officers were supporting the Al-Mahdi army and other religious groups. And you got to wonder, it's like, okay, well, who are they telling about me, right? Like so anyways, long story short, we go in there, we pick him up, and he actually made him drive his own, like him and his cousin, his nephew or cousin, the Sheikh's cousin, were in the car, and the battalion commander rode with them just to make him feel safe, to get him out of the village. And I remember driving back the convoy, we went up, we took him back to the unit, and we were sitting in the battalion commander office, and the subtitle on TV, breaking news, comes out that this guy was arrested, and he reads his name on the screen live. And he looks at the battalion commander and he's like in shock. And that Iraqi officer, the colonel, he just told him, he was like, yeah, man, I mean, we got to take you up there to the division, and they're gonna, his fate, I'll leave it alone. I don't know what happened once we turned him over. We didn't, again, have control over any of it. They had authority to do all of that, and it was straight up their chain. But that guy was bad. And when that evening, I brought this story up because if you remember the mortar attack a few months ago, he comes out and I introduce myself and I translate. Everybody goes in their way. Fast forward, he's getting picked up. Before he got in the car, and he looked at me and he's like, your name is Mazin, right? I remember you. And there was no way he remembered me from that one interaction I had from the mortar attack. He knew, they had intel on all of us, and he knew me. I never covered my face. I never hid my identity or none of it. And I was like, yeah, that's my name. And he was letting me know that I know who you are. I can get to you. I can get to your family. And that's big. I don't forget it because he called my name out. quickly. And I haven't seen him since then, since that mortar attack. It's been months. And there's no reason for him to remember my name other than just a warning saying,
To
hey,
intimidate.
yeah, I'm going to ride with him. But, just know that if something happens to me, you're a target as well. And so, yeah, that evening we picked him up, and the battalion commander, later took him to the division. And that's Alamo engagement started there. A little bit before that, we had some engagements there as well. And then later it shifted. I think quickly about the initial months for Alamo team, even though they saw what the Shepherds team said about me or heard and saw me in action, in terms of being combat oriented, I've always seen myself not just a linguist. Look, I can bring you a machine and it can take on English and spit out Arabic, vice versa. But I've always viewed myself as a cultural advisor, as a person who will tell you, who's lying to you, who's not just translating. The troops needed somebody to read between the lines more than just verbatim translation. So the Alamo team, some of them at least, in my opinion, still needed to be culturally combat oriented. And I was doing everything I can in their initial month or two to really just help them recognize these things and share my knowledge with them. And that, again, I respected, and it takes time. But I remember one mission. That's why I bring this up, because one mission, and I think Damon referenced that mission, we got hit by an IED. I think it was Damon's truck, if I'm not mistaken. And we were at a village. We were giving out, school supplies and whatnot, and just engagements with the locals. And I quickly recognized, I'm like, we're gonna get hit on the way back. And I think I told either Colonel Bowie, or at the time he was Major Bowie, Jim Bowie, he was the team chief, and it might have been Damon as well. I told the team, basically, I said, hey, we need to watch our way back. This dude just left. I'm telling you, they're doing something on our way out of here. We need to watch. And I don't want to say it was ignored. I don't think it was, not intentionally at all. Maybe it was the Iraqi battalion. I mean, we were limited as a mid team, as you know. It was 3 Humvees. It's not like you can send a Humvee by itself out there and a team with 3 people. So we needed the Iraqi army to secure our way out. And I think that IED could have been avoided. That's why I bring it up, because the communication was key there. And as much as we communicated and with the Iraqi team, I don't think we secured our way back enough that we got hit. That luckily we didn't lose anybody, but could have been worse, right? And I think right after that mission, I think that was another good turning point to really seal the deal in terms of trust and them trusting my judgment call on that. And then after that, it was when we shifted into the city, and obviously the engagements were a whole different level.
Yeah. The firefight that you guys got into, where Damon picked up a little bit of shrapnel, had to close call through his ammo pouch. That was that your first significant face-to-face shootout with, if I'm not mistaken, they were foreign fighters as well?
Yeah. I don't think it was my first, unfortunately, but I've gone through a lot of them that were, I think, by then, especially along Detroit, Route Detroit, with the other teams and some other engagements. But I'll freely share it with you. Mentally, that mission, it's my worst experience. And that's, I mean, you can come close with the enemy, as you know, during that year, any day. Yeah. But being isolated like that, lack of communication, basically your supply lines are gone. Right? Communication wise, you're trapped in a kill zone that no way in, no way out. And having limited hands to pull the trigger was a big deal, right? So we sustained the fight, and we stood our ground. The handful of us were there. And that's just different, mentally different experience, for us. And, ironically, look back at me having a weapon. That weapon came handy that day, luckily it was an AK, it wasn't not an M4. So, but again, I mean, that experience was different. I remember rolling into the city. I think we've had engagements with the enemy before then. Definitely did. But it was mostly IEDs, firefights. small arm fires through Tahrir and Old Baqubah, and then we move on from that. But that was a close, again, because we got trapped in that. And I think Damon spoke about it. The Iraqi unit that we had with us, at least the company that joined us, was from 4th Battalion. And I'm not questioning anybody's integrity, but again, we go back to the pressure the locals and these Iraqi army soldiers were living.
Yeah.
Them being from the same city. I mean, I'm
That's
not
a
giving
whole
excuse,
nother
but
dynamic.
right. Yeah. These people knew that their families out there vulnerable. They could be killed any day for what they're doing in the Iraqi army. So there was limitation into how much they're willing to do. And, them going into Chibena, that was the village, was a big deal for them. That mission was mainly them. We had a handful from the PSD group from our battalion, the ones that I moved up with, but everybody else was from 4th Battalion. Yeah. So quickly, that mission turned really upside down on us in that kill zone, and they pulled back, and now we're trapped in there. The only people that stayed with us, actually, the people from our battalion. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 3 or 4 of them. We didn't have that many of them to begin with.
Yeah, the insurgents smelled blood.
So very quickly, I mean, it turned upside down on us, and that mission was a big deal.
Is that the first time you had the Apaches come in and work with y'all?
I think we had them, if I'm not mistaken, at least in Tahrir. I think we had them before.
Yeah.
But I think, so I remember we lost our comms, right? For the most part, the Humvee down there, Sergeant Kennedy was the gunner, and that Humvee stayed down there, and they did everything they could. But we lost a lot of our communications because of the firefight. And I had communications still with the Iraqis, but I couldn't reach them. The ones that I reached, they were the ones that are close watching us, being shot at, and they wouldn't answer me. So my hope was to try to reach my battalion, and I call them my battalion, the ones that we worked with. And that was the hope while we were fighting. And I mean, later, I don't even remember when, or I know it was toward the end, but by the time the Apache showed up and we got some artillery support and all that, we've gone through the worst of it, in my opinion. And we've already had, again, in my opinion, I think we had already made up our minds that we're either not leaving this place alive or we're getting out with the help. But in my head, and I remember talking to Damon, and I think even Captain McKeown was with us, Sean was on the roof, Doc, Curry, we were up there, but we knew what we needed to do instead of just giving up. We're not giving up.
How many insurgents do you think were out there at the time?
I would say easily probably north of 50. Maybe closer to 75 or so. I would say probably more. I don't know. I mean, it was just thick wooded area that you couldn't really, they just kept coming. Yeah. The closest I heard them, and Damon always laughs at this, it's now it's laughable, but at the time, the closest,
not so funny.
Yeah, the closest they got to us is where I could hear them shouting, whatever, inspirational shouts they are doing, religious based phrases or whatever. And by then, I think this was past halfway point of firefight, but you can tell they were getting closer and closer. And at some point we thought they were in the same house we were in downstairs. I know they were in the house next to us for sure. I have pictures of that rooftop being lit up with holes in that water low square tank that people have on the rooftops. But they got close as far as I can tell, at least in the house next to us, and I can hear them. And I was so angry. I was shouting back at them, just to piss them off and let them know that we're not done. We're not giving up. We're not.
Yeah. Okay.
Damon always loves that story, and he talks about it. I was just, man, it's just anger. That's the thing that stays with you for a long time, and as you know, but for our audience, but that's the anger that comes out of you in combat, right, with the enemy. To me, again, I speak for myself.
Trying to kill you.
I speak for myself, but again, that's the anger that I have even in my later deployments in 2021 and whatever other deployments I've gone on. Every time, even it was indirect fire always pissed me off even more because I couldn't see them. Right. I want to see them. I want to bring it on. I want to fight you face to face. So these guys being that close to me, I was I was just, I hated what I heard from them. But I gave it back to them at least verbally, and Damon always laughs about how I was shouting back at them. But yeah, it was a big fight. It was tough getting out of there with everybody alive. It was huge. I remember a couple of the Iraqi army soldiers got hurt. We kind of treated them. Doc took care of them, and they stayed, but they couldn't fight. So I know their weapons came in handy, at least for me, and at least their ammunition did. And yeah, so
it's so that kind of, I think that was right around the same, so like the turning point, right, inside Baqubah, because things started getting, it was never a permissive environment.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, I know everyone has this mark, mental mark saying, hey, you know what? The environment we were operating in has just shifted.
Yeah.
It shifted to, like, all the shops started closing, the civilian traffic started going away, the schools weren't open, kids weren't on the soccer field. Was that firefight the moment in time where you guys are like, hey, things are shifting, or did it come at a later date?
No, I think definitely it's around that time, because that was around the time when we were tasked to go take over White Castle, which later became, a key point for us. And we were, again, the first unit. Again, I'm highlighting all these turning points for a mid-team. As you know, from military perspective, we're very limited, in personnel, resources. We relied on, obviously, the infantry units that took control of the AO. But again, we're limited. So yes, we took over White Castle. That was a turning point. We have done some missions back then around that time in just, I guess, west of White Castle, Khatun, that neighborhood. And I can count it, like there was a tiny, small traffic circle that we had to work our way in. And from what the locals and the intel told us is that that's where they executed publicly a lot of people that they viewed as traitors and whatnot. And that neighborhood was infested with terrorism.
Yeah. So the insurgents, their tactics, like, just absolute brutal.
Yeah.
You mentioned 40 some odd people that were decapitated.
Yep.
Like their intimidation, the Iraqi police.
Yeah.
I know with the intimidation efforts with the Iraqi police down in Baritz, that was another, well, not just Baritz, but heck, up in, it was north. The 82nd Airborne was operating out of there. It was north of Baqubah.
There's a dam. They had a different, closer to the division headquarters.
Zagania.
Zagania. Okay.
So Zagania, like we they came in and essentially kidnapped the IP commander.
Yeah.
I don't know what his fate ever turned out to be. I'm sure it wasn't good.
Right.
And then of course the Baritz IP station getting overrun and then blown up, and like things really started escalating.
Yeah.
And pretty much the same time you guys were out at the White Castle. Did you guys work at all with Alpha Company 112? That was because I believe they were in the IRF and you guys were at the White Castle. Was that two different?
Yes.
Yeah. So the IRF, Emergency Response Force.
Yeah.
At that traffic circle.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were there. Like I said, I think I remember the very first mission to White Castle was with Major Autry. He was the XO for the team, Dustin Autry, retired now, Colonel. And I think we went into the building. It's the highest building. You want to take control, but you're right across from your enemy, 100 yards, maybe, if that, in the middle of it. So we actually had to leave him back there with some Iraqi soldiers and maybe one or two other U.S. soldiers and run back to the base to get more people and more Iraqis and whatever, and bring a little bit more supplies for us just to have something there, footprint, and start establishing our footprint there. But yeah, we start with quickly became the spot where we operated out of, and we partnered with Alpha Company and everyone else.
So who was the enemy mostly on that side of the river?
Al-Qaeda, and there are all these other titles and different subgroups. I mean, to me, at least, irrelevant. They all had the same motive, is to kill us,
Right. Oh yeah.
and hurt the locals, and whatever. But there were different names and whatever. And I think, to your point about the locals and the IPs and the threat, that was in my opinion, one of the biggest priorities for me, is to really, as hard as it is, but make it make sense to the U.S. soldiers why these loyalties are shifting, right? It doesn't really mean, like, when we go to Tahrir and other areas, we're there, once a month, once every other week. Guess who's there the whole time?
Yeah.
The Al-Qaeda is. And guess who's vulnerable out there with their wives and kids and relatives and whatever? It's locals. As much as they hated them, I can relate to it because I lived through that. As much as we hated Saddam, we couldn't show him that until the troops showed up. The U.S. troops showed up, right? So these people in these neighborhoods, we go there, and the U.S. Soldiers would be like shocked or, offended that nobody's giving them intel. I was like, dude, just the fact that we walked into their house, it can lead to them being killed afterwards. Right. Whether they told us something or not, these groups are brutal. Like you were saying, they're ruthless and they don't care. They're going to come in and say, you let them in. No, they didn't let us in. We walked into their house. So they were really caught in the middle, and I've always felt for them. Now, were there people that actually hated us? Of course they did. I mean, nobody is perfect, but I think that, in my opinion, the majority of people were not happy about the conflict. They wanted these groups out of there. They just didn't have a choice. We couldn't be there, 24/7. And when we did, it led to bigger firefights and collateral damage that the locals got caught in the middle of it. So then you raise that to a different level. You, as an Iraqi citizen, signing up to be a police officer, it just adds a whole different level of you being under a threat. And even more, again, the linguists. Right. I never really judged an interpreter who maybe quit or wanted to wear a mask or whatever. Like, it's all respected. It's all rightfully so. But at the same time, it's like, that's when loyalties and that's when the motives start playing a role. It's not the paycheck anymore. It's not, you got to find really deep in your heart is why you're doing this. And also be at peace with the consequences of it. And that's not an easy ask. Be at peace to consequences for your own family or yourself. Consequences for your own self, it is what it is, right? We're a grown man and woman that decided to help the coalition forces, and most of the time we're riding in Humvees, and if something happens to me, it will happen to Bobby. But it's more of the pressure coming from back home. Your family is out there on their own, and these people had no limitations. They will go after your 3 years old brother, when they can, and they've done it thousands of times. So anyways, I think that perspective was challenging to maintain and relate to the troops as we engage the locals. But I tried my best, just to be that person in the middle and gain a little bit of trust from the locals as we engage them, but also watch out for the troops and kind of let them know what's going on.
Yeah. Knowing what you guys have been through and knowing what you have been through the lens in which you were looking through as an Iraqi national, and you could have left at any given time.
Right. Yeah.
You could have been like, you know what, I'm done.
Yeah.
That speaks volumes. And then your battalion that had come up from the South, right? Because I know the American forces, and maybe hopefully you can shed some light on this, like, we were trying to get, because at the time there was no shortage of insurgencies to fight in and around Baqubah, Barit, and we were trying to get the local Iraqi army units to work with us.
Yeah.
And I know there was one specific unit that basically said, no, we're not going to go.
Yeah.
Do you recall that at all when that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard and seen it from the other units, other than the battalion that we were with, with them pulling back, and obviously the mission that we had where we were trapped is an evidence to that, right?
Yeah.
Our battalion was completely different, on the other side of the spectrum. Now, some people might tell you, oh, well, because they were from the South and they were motivated to fight up north. I certainly don't see it that way. There was a level of that for sure. You can't deny it; it's there. But I watched them fight harder when they saw their American counterparts under attack. I watched them telling Major Bowie not to walk into the house first, let them walk in first. Colonel Karcher's experience with General Saman Barzani, the brigade commander at the time, that experience between them, being hurt in combat for each other. I mean, we can go on and on about stories about this strong bond that they developed with us. So that battalion, we had really zero issues with them. The issue in terms of loyalty or their dedication to the mission. There's always the issue of, lack of discipline, combat discipline, fire. That's just the way the army is, and we can laugh at it. But it's definitely no lack of devotion to the cause to go out there and fight.
I think I'm trying to make the connection between the lack of a motivation to go out and fight and the complexities of the battlefield, right?
Yep.
Because the complexities of the battlefield is like, hey, they're from this area.
Yeah.
They're, they have relatives in this area.
Agreed.
They have friends in this area. They have brothers and sisters and people they went to school with in this area. So it's not always just clear cut like, hey, they just, it's lack of will.
Yeah.
No. It's like the home field advantage too, right? Or disadvantage, the home field disadvantage. Yeah, and then to complicate things more, then you throw the Americans into it, and then to complicate things even more, now you have foreign fighters coming in.
Yeah,
and then I know we eventually wound up having Kurdish fighters. Come down too. How did was there
sensitive? The people were sensitive to it.
Very
Locals,
sensitive.
Iraqi army, and that goes beyond just the fact that it's a unit coming from somewhere else. Yeah. There was an animosity against the battalion that we were with because they were from the South for sure. We had to discipline them on a few times where maybe they had some logos or some flags or whatever, like with our battalion, and we're like, hey, you can't do that. This is gonna create more enemies than friends and whatever. But it wasn't as bad as when the Kurds came down, and that goes beyond just from a different geography. Being from different geography is more from the years that under Saddam.
Right.
So everyone outside of Kurdistan, the South, even the West of Iraq, always had that animosity toward the Kurds because, they've been living a much better life throughout the 90s when we didn't have anything to eat. The rest of Iraq did, and they were prospering, month after month. Saddam had limitation in how far he can fly his airplanes on there. There was, no fly zone imposed by, the UN, and they were definitely prospering and watching. Not their fault. I don't generalize on anybody, but they had their own Kurds government and everything, and he left them alone. So later, fast forward, when the locals and even our battalion, they saw the Kurds coming down, and they're like, what makes them better? We live this, we're going to fight this. And, so there was definitely sensitivity to it. But they knew that because the brigade commander was Kurd and, he brought his PSD was for sure from the get-go. They were all Kurds and Peshmerga, that's what they called them. But within the Iraqi army, remember, a lot of the soldiers in the Iraqi army were from the former army.
Yeah.
So they still hold it against the Kurds and saying, hey, I served under Saddam. I had to suffer. I had to go fight the whatever war and all of that. You didn't do anything. And now you're coming down here to control these cities or fight in it. They didn't want that. Yeah. So there was definitely a conflict of interest there, in my opinion. And then, to your point, it was very complex. I never really questioned somebody for not wanting to put their face or identity out there, or because like you said, they have relatives and family, and it's tough spot. And I think that's the perspective that get missed. And obviously the media misses a lot of perspectives, but here in the US, to our society who was back here, even later when I moved, in any engagement, whether it's my neighbor, a colleague in my civilian job or anywhere that I talk with them, I try to correct what the media put out there,
Yeah.
because these people weren't just they didn't like Al-Qaeda. They were fearful of what Al-Qaeda can do. And can you blame them? If you reverse the situation and ask, an American soldier to leave their loved ones in a very, hostile environment and go fight against that enemy, knowing that very well, stories every day happening to these families, somebody will change their mind as well. It takes a different will and different devotion to raise your hand and say, yes, I'm going to face this no matter what the consequences. So yes, it was very complex between the Iraqi army units, the locals, each area, and linguists. I mean, it's just complex.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the things that's really hard on people that weren't there. It's oh, and by the way, the enemy doesn't wear a uniform, right? No. It's like they just blend right into the civilian population for the most part.
Yep.
It's an untrained eye. Talk to me about so in Biarritz, Bravo Company maintained that combat outpost down there. And to the south of the Biarritz IP station was a Iraqi army unit. Very hard to get to unit because you could come in from the west, and I think that was down Route Detroit that you were talking about, or you could come from the north and go down, but there was only really two ways to get to that unit. And it was only like a day or two after they tried to overrun our outposts at the Biarritz IP station. Unsuccessful, but they certainly gave it one heck of a shot. A couple of days later, they go and do a full-blown attack on the Iraqi army unit that was down south. I know, me personally, it's still pains me to know that outpost got overrun. We couldn't get to them. It was a lose-lose situation for everyone. Do you have any insights that you could add from your perspective of what happened that day?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had it was around December. So December 19 is when we had that mission. We got trapped on the rooftop with Damon and Doc and Captain McEwen and the rest of the team. And then, like you said, quickly after that escalated. We take over White Castle, and now we start getting involved. But that AO in Burris was still under the 4th Iraqi battalion, not our battalion. And it was under somewhat the mid-team. That was our sister mid-team, the Guerrillas. I think that was their
Guerrillas. Yes.
Yeah, that was their call sign. So we were not quote unquote involved in Burris. We were involved in their southern border, like you were saying, on Detroit. Our battalion, Iraqi battalion, had a checkpoint that leads into Burris from that end, and that was about as far as we've gotten there initially. I remember, I think it was around December 23rd. I want to say 24th, right there by Christmas. And we got a call. I think Damon referenced it here, but we got a call about a V-bed attack, and there was a V-bed blocking that entrance into Burris from our side. And, we needed to get out there, and it was a crazy night, cold, rainy, everything. I think it was the same night that later they launched that full-on attack. But I remember us going to that end initially and literally dragging out a V-bed out of the, what was blocking that route to get into Burris, to get to the IP station.
Yeah.
So yes, that night was rough. That was our initial kind of like involvement in it, but 4th Battalion still had it. Now, as far as insight and hearing it, I mean, we were in the talk every night and every hour throughout those nights leading up to the worst of it, just listening and talking to our sister mid-team and, and hearing what the other battalion is going through. But we had our own, AO and mission and Iraqis to motivate, and we knew it was coming. I remember, I think I was talking to Major Bowie, and we knew it was coming that where we gonna get dragged in there as well with our own battalion. I think that's when a brigade commander, in my opinion, the Iraqi brigade commander started to looking at, okay, is this a loyalty thing? Is this, something that we can hold the ground because of loyalty and these people are locals? So should I bring the other battalion in? But then that battalion, as you can tell from what we said so far, it keeps getting stretched thinner and thinner because of quote unquote, they don't have motivation or they don't have a lack of motivation, right? So then you go from south of Iraq to Narawan to Detroit to Baqubah, but you got the other side of Baqubah. And now you're like, okay, you got other side of Baqubah and you got Boris. And so they started getting stretched thin. And we're talking losing people along the way too.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them weren't getting paid. I remember having conversations with them. Some of them weren't even getting paid for months at a time.
So talk to me about that. Why weren't they getting paid? Corruption?
Corruption, and just the infrastructure was still bad. The Iraqi army was still being kind of getting back into the rhythm of, but yeah, you can sum it up as just say corruption, delays, whatever it is. But I grew up there and I know these people and my mind was blown watching them run into these houses, run into the firefight when there is a $0 behind that motivation. Yeah. Zero. And by the way, their families is economically like bad. Like they don't have much income. They're relying on so they living off debt from other relatives until they get paid, but they're not giving up on the fight. And I remember, our mid team is just like blown away by this, and they're like, they haven't gotten paid. And I was like, no. It hasn't. They haven't gotten paid in like 3-4 months, and they still show up every day and fight.
Outside of their monthly pay, and they got paid monthly.
Monthly, yes.
That kind of environment, you might want to get paid daily,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
There no life insurance policy.
No, nothing.
If somebody got killed,
nothing.
That was it.
Nothing. Yeah. Later, I think years later, I want to say, maybe like I would say, you can even say recently is when they start establishing some systems for them where, their families will get some benefits or whatever, but that's nothing significant. Definitely not at that time. I wouldn't say they had anything up until 2011 or so. So yeah, these people were literally in a firefight every day. But yeah, I think that's when we started seeing, okay, there's indications that we're gonna get pulled in there, and then big operation start, the planning phases of it. And we definitely got pulled into that.
Yeah. So you got to see, it from, how long were you in that area when Alamo team left? Were you still in and around and doing interpreter? Because I know somewhere you wound up making a journey.
I left before them.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I left before them. So they were still on the ground.
So you didn't get to see Baqubah go from absolute kinetic operations to post-troop surge and awakening.
Right. So I think I left the team around February. February or March. I want to say maybe March. March, I think, was my last mission toward the end. Yeah. But I think we dealt with the awakening before that, because I remember, so the mission that in Boris that Damon spoke about, where, that Iraqi Humvee was, blown away, and he pulled some people the soldiers out of the water and all that. Coming back from that, I think we dealt with the awakening groups for a little bit, because I remember meeting with them in the government center in Baqubah, and it got in my head. I mean, Bobby, you got to think about this. At the end of the day, mentally, I had to go and be in the middle between them and stay neutral and not show emotions. And I am not that. I'm authentic person through and through. And if I, again,
I don't have a poker face either.
Right. So I can't. So that, I think around that time is when it was becoming harder and harder for me mentally to stay neutral and not tell these people, my feelings about, no, you were just, I don't care what awakening you're talking about. You were just blowing us up. I get it. There's politics, there's forgiveness, there's all kind of things. I'm in the mix of it. It didn't sit well with me. It definitely started getting in my head, and I started recognizing that. That's one factor I think led to my early quote unquote departure. And then beyond that, I think the main factor was that up to that point, it must have been at least 12 months since I seen my family. I couldn't have gone home. The only time I left the wire was to go on missions. That's it. I couldn't go travel back to my hometown. My family was still being under pressure. I mean, it was just enormous amount of pressure mentally on all these missions that you've gone through, the losses that you experienced along the way in the military and the civilian side. Friends, neighbors, relatives. I mean, every day you hear about these things, and it's mainly because of what I and others decided to do for the troops, right? Like hearing about my childhood, I don't want to minimize it, but that guy that I lost, that interpreter, I mean, I grew up with him. We played barefoot soccer on the streets, like from the age that I can remember. And then he graduates college. I graduate college. He started working as an interpreter, and then he died. I mean, I can count more and more. So leading up to that point, we dealt with the awakening groups. I remember very well at the government center in Baqubah.
What was some of them conversations like?
I mean, starting a new page in itself, to me, didn't sit well with me. With people that were just blowing me up yesterday, that's one. Two, I probably would buy it if I had faith that these people would change, but I knew very well that they were not changing. I knew very well that they were doing it because one, they felt the pressure. Two, they needed more probably, political support, whatever it is, right? They knew they had their backs against the wall. We definitely by then started building, a larger footprint, and we brought in more troops, and we were definitely on the momentum. They might have won, unfortunate smaller fights and battles, but we were definitely on the momentum side of it. And so yeah, I didn't have a belief that these people loyalty will last 2 weeks, and I hated it.
Wow.
That these people were just took away from us heroes from both sides, the Iraqi army and the US forces. And now I have to sit with them in the government center. And again, it's just not my game. And it reflected later on me, even like on a later deployment with the Marines in 2008. My role shifted a little bit into being a little bit more involved in those meetings because of the officers that I worked with. And I didn't last in that mission very long. I quickly said, hey, no, this is not for me. I'm going back. And I ended up going back to BIAB and worked with First ID. I said, I can't do it. So yeah, March is around the time when I left. And I left straight from Baqubah to the airport very much, and left the country. But it was just enormous amount of pressure.
Yeah, man. You said your family was feeling pressure. What kind of pressure were they feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot, man. It was just from daily text messages to their phones to my phone.
They were
phone
text
call.
messaging your family?
It's very common, man. You can ask any interpreter. That was common. That was like, if you're lucky, they just call in or texting you. It's not like there's any way you can trace, or you can't do anything. They knew they can get away with it. To letters, to personal attacks, to, I mean, you name it, to everything that they could do. And again, that was a tactic because they may not get to us when we're in the up armor vehicles, but they can get to your relatives. That gets in your head. Same thing with the police, the Iraqi police, the Iraqi army. So they were going after everybody's families. I think it was just more of like who was more protected than others in the cities, So to me, in my hometown, for example, Al-Qaeda has no, any Sunni, quote unquote, Sunni-based terrorist groups had no footprint in the South. They couldn't infiltrate that. They couldn't do anything. It was more of the other side extreme groups, that the Shia, again, quote unquote Shia groups, Al-Mahdi army and other groups that were prominent in my city, but they also opposed to what I was doing. That was my threat to my family. Otherwise, like for me, I'm facing the risk that we all faced in combat. So that was, to me, it's like, okay, whatever. That's just the nature of the beast and what I signed up for. But for my family, is that was that group. And, I think Damon referenced some stories that, my family and the team, definitely, obviously, the story with Coral Bowie calling all the way from Alabama back to Iraq and getting me some help to get out of there. I think that was the last time I ever went home, and then I think it was later, months later, I was just like, look, I can't go home. All I'm doing is doing missions, and this is just unbearable at this time.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. That sounds pretty absolute incredible.
Yeah.
How this transpired, right? Like you're in your hometown,
Yeah.
but you're getting word that people are honing in on you.
Yeah, so I mean, so throughout the months and the years, you can tell definitely it became harder and harder for me to go home. And every time I got home, I felt a lot more limited. And I mean, I can tell you so many stories about the ways that, I traveled home and I came very close to being picked up or killed or, very close. I mean, it's just unbelievable how fortunate I am, to be here still talking about it. But I wasn't alone. I mean, there were thousands of people going through it. So, anyways, I went home, and one of my best friends, again, childhood friends, his family is deep into Al Mahdi group. Um, but the bond and the friendship and the family ties between me and them, they will never compromise me. They will never hurt me. I mean, I'm one of their own. Uh, you know, uh, so he called me and he said, "Hey, I think they know you're there. I don't think this is something anybody can control. I think you're in trouble this time around, but I don't know what you can and cannot do." So he gave me a little bit of kind of heads up, and he said, I think somebody knows that you're home. Granted that I started going home without anybody knowing, and the only way I'll travel down south is with the Iraqi army convoy. I'll ride with them to go south because I can't just ride the bus or the taxi or whatever. So, anyways, but I mean that it shows you the bond that I developed with the team, and the only people in my own country at the time that I could trust and call on to really rescue me were the Americans, and even more, it's Team Alamo. And so I called Major Bowie at the time, and he was back home in Huntsville, and I told him what was going on, and I said, "Hey, I mean, I'm very much trapped. I mean, I think if I leave, I'm probably obviously more vulnerable. They're probably around me any minute." And he did what he did, as far as calling down there, making connections. But even again, going back to I think the key word of the day is complexity, right? Of this situation is I get the phone call from the ODA team that is down there at Camp Delta in my hometown, and but the first person who spoke to me was their linguist. He was Egyptian. I still remember it. I recognize the accent or the dialect, and I said, "Hey, I'm not talking to anybody. I can't. I got to talk to the Americans directly. I speak. I'm a linguist myself. So, and he was like, "Well, I'm coordinating and I'm, talking to the Iraqi unit." I was like, "No, man, you don't understand. I'm not riding in an Iraqi Humvee. I'm not speaking to anybody. The only people I'll speak with is the ODA team. That's who I'm supposed to be talking with. That's the only people that I will leave my house with, and that's it. So he put me on call with them, and I spoke with them, felt safely with them. But that was the last trip. That was the last trip, and
So a special forces unit comes down,
yeah,
grabs you.
yeah.
Did they get you out of your
So
house, or
again,
did you have like a rendezvous point and then you guys linked up
Yeah.
and they pulled you out?
right? Yeah, it was more like that. You had to think about, okay, well, you just let them knock on the door and pick
Right.
you up. I mean, like, what
Yeah.
happens to my family afterwards? They were
Right.
already under threat and pressure, so it had to be a pre-arranged, at least, in a little bit. But you had to think about the timing, how long I can survive out there on my own until they pick me up, and the coordination of that. I mean, it was tight window. Anything could have happened, and again, the trust level was like it had to be, the Green Berets that I will,
Yeah.
write with or speak with or communicate with anything.
So they pick you up. Where did they take you?
Camp Delta
Camp
initially,
Delta.
yeah, that's the base closer by us, and then eventually worked my way back up to the team, and yeah.
You linked up with the team, and then somehow you wound up in Egypt. Was it Egypt?
Yeah, Egypt. It was Egypt. Yeah. So I mean, again, growing up all the way until to that point, no intent in my mind that I'll leave the country. I mean, I'm a very family person. To the day I call my mom twice a day. You know, I'm just connected to my family and never really wanted to leave. But again, you got to roll with the punches and understand, you know, and be realistic and not stubborn. I hit that point where mentally I didn't feel like I was still in the fight around March. And again, we're talking about units rotating deployments from the U.S. and I'm still there. I'm the continuity.
Yeah, man, that's a long time in
Right.
that place.
Yeah. And again, doing that over and over, a lot of people ask me is like, you know, people who doesn't know the background or the story, and they're like, so have you been blown up? And I was like, I can't even tell how many times. And it's not something to brag about, but it takes a toll on you. So I hit that point, I think around February, March timeframe, where I felt like I was losing my effectiveness in the mission, you know, because I was letting my anger come out. I was not effective. I think I was influencing, even if the mid team wanted to be a little bit more, you know, political and manage the mission, I was maybe becoming a distraction. At least in my head, I thought that way. So for whatever reason, I was like, hey, this is time for me to leave at least. And I had nowhere to go in Iraq. I did have a cousin that was living in Egypt. His daughter went to medical school there. So he was there with her just to be with her and support her, and found my way, you know, to Iraq. I think he had to do some kind of like an invite or whatever for them to give me a visa, because it was limited to where the Iraqis could go at the time to any country. So made it to Egypt, stayed with him, really zero plans. You know, at the time, I mean, I guess I need to back it up. The visa thing was just a conversation. I give 100% credit to Captain McEwen. I mean, he came and approached me and he's like, hey, there's this program that, you know, they activating again. And I think it's worth, you know, putting you through paperwork. But we have no hope that this may not happen or when. You know, it's kind of like a long shot, but he's like, why not? Let's just put the paperwork. So we do the paperwork. It's something that in my head, it was like, oh yeah, something Sean is doing, and that was it. I didn't know if it was going to work out or not. And then, you know, the team worked on it. Obviously, I'm grateful that they did all the paperwork, the letters of recommendations. It was very tight window that the program initially was authorizing only 50 interpreters from the entire country of Iraq. And to meet the criteria, you had to have faced a significant amount of risk, you and your family. It's unfortunate criteria because when I tell my story, people take it at face value and they're like, well, luckily you met the criteria. I was like, well, actually it's not. It's really not a fortunate thing that I met that criteria, because it meant that my family had to give up, sacrifice so much. So you're torn. You're between the guilt and what anybody can call success. It's not a brag story. It came with pain. It came with sacrifice from my own loved ones.
Wow.
So unfortunately, I want to say, quote unquote, as much as I'm grateful for it, I did meet that criteria. And at the time, it was General Petard, Dana Petard, who wrote he was the very first GO in the chain of command for the mid-team, and wrote the letter of recommendation for me and the other linguists that came out of FOB Gabe. And the team did it. But when I left, the point being is that when I left, I had no indication that this thing is coming. Neither did the team. I just left because I had no safe haven and I mentally couldn't do it. So I thought maybe I'll just go there, take a break, a few months and come back, reset after I reset. And so I get there and no plan, just spending whatever little money that I saved and, you know, living off of whatever help that my cousin was helping me with. And eventually, you know, the paperwork came through when I was there. And I think I got there April, I want to say. And then around between April until September is when I arrived to the US in September of that year. And halfway through that period is when I got the call from the team and they're like, hey, you know, your visa came through and we're ready for you to come and travel over. And Damon spoke about how they put the money together to buy me the ticket. I literally didn't have the money. But I, you know, I would have made it happen. My family would have, you know, helped me or whatever, but the team recognized it right away and they bought the ticket or they transferred the money to me. And I remember Colonel Bowie at the time joking with me, and because I was telling him, I said, hey, I really don't want the money from anybody. I'll figure it out. You know, my family will send me. And he's like, don't be stupid. I have a big farm here, a lot of cows, and you're a veterinarian. You can help me in the farm. And
There you
it was
go.
just this joke. I remember that us talking, and he's like, "Don't, just come out here, and then we'll figure it out." And then yeah, so they've been there for me, man, the whole time. Them and their families.
So when you were in Egypt, no threat there. You were just kind of waiting for the next move.
I think when I started going to the embassy, it was the initial period. It was just unknown. I had no idea what to do and why I'm here.
Yeah.
The only thing I could think of is that once I feel, hopefully I reset and I relax, then I can go back and continue doing that. That was the only thing I could think of. But once I got the word that, hey, your visa is ready, you need to go to the embassy. Once I started going to the embassy, I did get a little bit of harassment from their security agencies and whatnot. And I would imagine that they knew what I was doing probably already. They have a very robust, intel system.
I mean, Egypt was getting ready to get lit too.
Right. Yeah. So they a little bit, but once I got the visa and all that, I left that country, never went back.
Interesting. So talk to me about the flight, like getting on that plane, knowing that you're coming to America. Like, what's going through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, to the day, and I mean, I can't ignore the pain. That's the problem, is that as much as I love sharing this to help others, but to me individually and to my family is rough.
Right.
So getting on the plane, you just feel like you're getting further and further from your family and you're leaving them behind. The problem with that program was that it was only for the linguists at the time, at least. So they didn't take anybody with you unless you were married. But if you were single, like your parents, your siblings, nobody could join you.
Leave everyone.
Right. So you have to decide and say, I am, quote unquote, that's selfish. Depends on how you look at it. You're leaving your family back and they're facing that monster, not you. And you're going to go enjoy your life in the US. So think about that feeling as you're boarding that flight. That dominated my mind more than any excitement. And that's why, like, even to the day when I share these, experiences and talk about it, it's there's a sense of guilt. There's a sense of responsibility. There's a debt that I always owe them. And again, not just me, like everybody who's gone through this journey, there's a debt that you owe that they faced, even if it's a text message telling them that you all gonna be killed tomorrow, as simple as that, that was terrifying to civilians, to my sisters. And
they didn't sign up for that.
Right. So then you have to live with that and board that plane and knowing that, so it was a lot of unknown. It was a lot of, guilt, a lot of, kind of being torn about it. I think the only excitement that I had is seeing Team Alamo again. That was my comfort. Seeing them again, hugging them, and being reunited with my team is similar to the bond. Again, we all know in the military, I needed to see my brothers because in Egypt I was lost. Without them, I felt lost. So I needed to see them, and that was, again, to the day, they're like the light in my journey. Them and everyone that I worked with, but at least them and even the Shepherd's team, the people that helped me transition here, they're the light that keeps me going. Every time I see them and hug them and talk with them and their families and the bond that we sustained to the day is what makes it somewhat balanced, from the other side of feeling of it. So yeah, I leave Egypt September. I head to Huntsville, Alabama, and we start from there.
A little bit of a culture shock.
Yeah, for sure. I think most of the English that I known, as you can imagine, it was very military terminology, and I wasn't ready to sit in Olive Garden and look at the menu or Texas Roadhouse or whatever it is, right? So the simple things that others might take for granted, I had to learn it. Because up until that point, sure, I knew English, I knew language, but culturally, all I knew is military culture. You talk to me about Army, I don't know, acronyms, I knew them probably better than some others who have been in the service, just because of the nature of what I've done and how much I was involved in translating those terminologies. So that's mostly of what I've known. And now I'm here, but it's a start. It's a culture change. And I think one thing I try to stay is resilient and adaptable. You gotta stay adaptable. You gotta roll with the punches. You gotta be coachable and open-minded. And that's how I approach that transition. But yeah, so I had a lot to learn from the basics of just the documents and the paperwork and driving and all of it to, figuring out, okay, what's next for you? I haven't touched anything or read anything about being a veterinarian in years by then. And, but the bigger thing was that my heart was still committed to the cause.
Right.
And I couldn't disconnect from it that quick. So I get here September. By January, I was hired as a linguist again. And the team tried to talk me out of it. And they're like, hey, you just came back. You need to give your break, give your brain a break. You need to relax. And I was like, no, I got to go back. And, mind you, this time around, the contract was, in a six figure, $150,000.
More than $500 a
Right.
month.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And I'm telling you, I think I saved, if anything, I probably saved 20 or 30% of it. The rest went to my family directly. So I saw, okay, financially, I can at least help my family a little bit better, to include renovate my house that was damaged and harmed by, those groups. And just help them financially as much as I can. But also, I couldn't disconnect, from the cause. So I went back with the Marines for
Back with Marines.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What part of Iraq did you go to?
We went to the west of Iraq. So further west, where Al-Assad is.
Yeah.
So there's Camp Ramadi, Al-Assad, and then Al-Baghdadi.
Yeah.
That's what it's called, small town there. We had a small camp there. And it was similar. It was a mid-team experience. When we as the people who were hired as linguists, we were at Fort Benning, at CRC there, and we were kind of waiting. We've done the draw for our equipment and done the paperwork and whatnot, and they came and they said, hey, there might be a little delay in deploying you all. It just depends on the demand from the units or whatever. But if anybody is willing to go faster, or wants to go faster, the Marines are needing people. But here's the requirements. You got to go spend 3 months with them at Camp Pendleton in California. They're going to train you up just like a Marine. Not basic training, but they're going to train you on their weapon system, their self-aid. The expectation is different. You might be asked to do more than just linguistic, during the missions. And I couldn't raise my head fast enough, man. I mean, that's the life. That's what I wanted. I did not want to be in the green zone. I did not want to be anything has to do with something that's not tactical. Yeah. So I was like, that's me. And when they found out what I've done and they matched us well, and it was a no-brainer. So I went to Pendleton, spent 3 months with them there. And then we deployed out of Pendleton to, it was 2008. By then, March, when we departed, we went to Baghdadi. That's what it's called. We started there. We were embedded, same scenario with an Iraqi battalion out west. We did what we did. And I transitioned when the team was leaving. I transitioned to Camp Ramadi.
It was a lot of different environment. I mean, I was post-troop surge.
Yes.
So everything was pretty...
Yeah.
Was it on the upswing? Were you feeling like, hey, this is a good thing now?
Yeah. Yeah. It was political for sure, more political than tactical. I don't think we got engaged by the enemy at all during the months that I was with that mid team, even though we were out west. The Iraqi army team was still good. The battalion was mostly from the south, but they had people mixed from that province as well. And but yeah, definitely less intensity in terms of engagements with the enemy. It was mostly establishing, the city council or, governor and, kind of rebuilding phase, right? Yeah. So it was definitely on the other side of it.
Were you able to sneak away and go see your family?
No, I mean, I had one trip that the team chief and myself had to fly to Baghdad to the embassy for a meeting that he had, and I flew with him, and I asked my family again. I had to think about it: is that they coming into the green zone or whatnot? And so I didn't sneak out or go see them at all. Didn't even consider it. Even if I had the chance, I wouldn't go. But I asked them to come over, and again, I'm asking more of them versus me sacrificing and all of that. But I did, and they were happy to do it. They came in, and that was, I think I saw them for about maybe an hour. Okay. And that was it. 2008. At the green zone. That's where I saw them. They came in, and
And was that a 9 month overseas in
Yeah,
Iraq?
so with the mid team, I did the complete 9 months. I did all in all about a year, I think. I think I came back month 11 or 12 into it. So 9 months with them, and then I got transferred to Camp Ramadi, which was a higher level mid team. They were advising the Iraqi division commander, Lieutenant General, but his counterpart was General Kelly at the time. He was the commandant for the Marines. And then his DCO was General Miles, 1 star. General Kelly was 2 star at the time. And the mid team was there to represent General Kelly. And I was with the commander of that mid team. I think one thing I remember the experience is that one obviously was different. I didn't even need to put uniform on. We were dressed up in kind of like business casual. All we met with is politicians and, lieutenant generals and, parliament members or whatever.
Okay.
That's when I started getting in my head. I was like, I can't do this. I know these people lying. They get on TV and tell the Iraqi people one thing and they come in here and tell us another. So it started to make me question my decision to continue to do that role. And then I remember General Kelly had a linguist that was from Jordan. And the guy wasn't like culturally wasn't obviously very I guess knowledgeable with it. So he was struggling, and John Kelly is not his role and his influence there is not someone that you want to do him like that where
Right.
you
He's
got to
the
give him
best of the
somebody.
best.
Yeah, you got to give him like that, and they adjusted. They gave him a guy actually lives in Detroit, a good friend of mine named Joey. Joey was originally from Iraq, but he was raised here, but he lived in Detroit, where it's very heavy on the Middle Eastern,
Yeah.
language and Arabic spoken. He's actually a Syrian, so he's a Christian, but he spoke Arabic very well, and he knew the culture very well. And Joey was perfect when they slid him in. And actually, Joey was at CRC at Fort Benning with me, him and another friend of ours, Johnny, from Detroit as well. And and then, so they stayed behind. I went with the Marines and full circle. Then we meet again. And Johnny introduced me to Joey. And anyways, Joey started doing a great job. But I started getting pulled up a little bit with that team as well to help out. And, but again, I think two things that made me decide and say, hey, I'm done. I love the Marines. If there's any other branch, I'm an Army guy through and through, obviously. But if there's any other path I would have taken, I'd probably join the Marines because of their discipline. And, but I felt like the Marines were not equipped to be advisors or quote unquote peacemakers just because of the nature of their training and their focus. That's one. Two, they didn't really have the diversity of experiences or assets just because the corps is so small compared to the Army.
Right.
In our Army, we have from doctors to engineers to pilots to you name it, we have it.
Yeah, in the Alamo team, not only do you have the diverse military occupations, but also their backgrounds, because they
Civilians.
were all civilian.
Yeah.
Well, not civilians, but they were reservists or
Right.
guardsmen, right?
Yeah.
Like Damon was a sales guy.
Right. Yeah. So
And you got engineers
Yeah.
and all these different things.
yeah. So the Marines were, I think, in my opinion, they were at a disadvantage to be asked to do that role. But hey, that was the mission. That was the AO they controlled, and they got to do it, and they did great. But between my challenge being sitting down with I remember meeting like the Iraqi parliaments and their other politicians or whatever. So I was struggling with that. And I think physically, my ears were at that point were like really bad. And I remember flying the Osprey primarily with them. And that thing goes up and down vertically very quick. And I was literally, I didn't expect it, but I was so challenged with that because of years before. And so that was, between the physical limitations and traveling on that helicopter sometimes and me struggling with sitting in front of politicians, all combined, I made the decision and I said, I can't do this, anymore. I've obviously done by then probably 10 months, maybe, 11 months with the Marines. So I said, I need to go back with tactical units. And so I moved up to Biop or south to Biop at the airport. And I was assigned with 168 out of Fort Riley. Infantry battalion. They had Abu Ghraib region, and I was assigned to their battalion commander.
This is around
Beginning 2009. now. We're talking like early 2009, because I deployed March of 2008 with the Marines. Yeah, so early mid 2009. I think I must have completed maybe 12, because I came back around June of 2009 to the US
You did.
from that deployment. Yeah, so I did, I think, over 12 months. But that experience, 3 months with BIAP, I was back to my life from Baqubah. I was out every day at Abu Ghraib, and I was living quote unquote the life, because again, I'm the battalion commander's linguist. But the mission we were doing, you said it earlier, you get to a point where like there's no money that could be good enough for you to do what you do. And mind you, I started with $500. Now I'm getting $150K a year, but even that became minimal. It became irrelevant to me, because I looked at it. I had my own room, I had internet, I had TV, nothing compared to what I had in Baqubah. But the 2 hours that I spent outside the wire, the risk was extremely high. I mean, I think around that time is when we started seeing them using IEDs that were handheld, and they will throw it, and it act like almost like the AFP, where it looks like an RPG round, and they will throw it from the overpass down to the Humvees, and it just go through any armor. And my convoy got hit by it 3 times. Unfortunately, we lost some people along the way. It wasn't my Humvee, but I started thinking about it and saying, look, there's always something bigger that I can do. I think whatever bigger power that we believe in that saved me through those rough times, I got saved probably for a reason. Not to say that this is not a good reason, but I think there is a bigger thing that I need to do. And to me, at that time, I was like, I need to join. The paycheck is irrelevant to me. Linguists were fighting to go to BIAP, because BIAP was like the green zone, right? Like it was really nice. They had, good DFAC and whatever. But to me, it was like, it's over my head. I was like, no one cares. You can come have my place. I need to do something bigger than this. And something bigger was for me to come back to the US and then join. And that's when join the army. Oh yeah, it was no question. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, join the army.
Did you sign up as an enlisted guy and then go OCS? Or
no,
ROTC?
direct commission afterwards. Direct commission. Yeah. So
talk to me about that. So you come back, you join the army. Are you a citizen?
No, I was a green card holder.
Green card holder.
Still. Wow. And so I come back, and Jim, Damon, Dustin, Major Autry. So I came back to Huntsville. I mean, that's all I had and I knew. And again, we can have an entire episode talking about how their families stood up by me and welcomed me up front, and then later when I come back. But all of them were like, hey, look, whatever decision you make, you need a few months of break. You saved a little bit of money, enjoy your life. Let's just hang out, do whatever you want to do, for a few months, and then you can go ahead and join if you still want to. And I did that from June, I think, until maybe September of that year. I was just antsy, man. I was just like, every week I was telling Jim, I was like, I need to go join. I can't be here. And so anyways, I think by October of that year, I walked into a recruiting station in Huntsville, and I told them, I said, I want to join, but I want nothing to do with linguistic. That was the key. I said, put me in anything. My brain is fried. I need to do something different, but I do want to be in uniform and continue to serve. So at the time, quartermaster, I mean, based on, Major Autry, he was quartermaster officer. He's a logistician, and, he talked me into it. He's like, man, you can't go wrong with that. Because initially I was in infantry. That's all I knew. That's how I wanted to do. I told Damon, and the Damon is like, man, you've already done it. You got to do something different. You've lived this life. I don't think it's gonna, help you mentally. You need to do something different. So he kind of, talked to me, and he said, listen to Dustin, see what they can fit you, because you're not a U.S. citizen. I couldn't commission right away. I said I didn't care. So I joined as an enlisted quartermaster, 92 Alpha. I went into active duty.
So you join the quartermaster corps.
Yep.
You go off to basic training.
Yeah.
Where's basic training for quartermaster? Folks?
Fort Jackson.
Fort Jackson.
Yeah, Fort Jackson. AIT was Fort Lee, Virginia. I met my wife, so I can't miss that, right? If she's watching this episode, she'll met my wife actually in Huntsville, Alabama. She's from Iraq as well. Never thought that I'll run into another Middle Eastern person, at least not in Alabama at the time. There wasn't that many people all over the country. I think later in the years, the country took on a lot more immigrants, and you start seeing sporadics of people being in different cities. But initially, I think around that time, 2007, we're talking maybe San Diego primarily, where you see a lot of Middle Easterns, Phoenix, Arizona, Detroit for sure. And there were a good decent of Kurds, Iraqis, but there were Kurds in Nashville, Tennessee. So there were like the bigger hubs. It wasn't that many in, other places. But so I didn't expect her, but to be there. And she was working actually at the time at Redstone Arsenal, the army base there. And she was working at the PX.
Okay, I was gonna say, was she a linguist?
No,
Okay.
she was not. She had already moved. I think around the same time, she had family members that did similar, work to mine, and they have already moved to the U.S. and she was already working there at the PX in the food court. But man, this lady, I mean, again, we can talk on and on, but she worked her way up very fast and just being coachable, learning, and blended in with the society, with her friends, with her colleagues quickly. She started, and I respect that. That's why I highlighted, is because she started just cleaning the tables in the food court, and in less than a year, she was a supervisor and, manager and with AFIS, and they were sending her to all these trainings, and now she's got direct report. I mean, it's just an amazing human that, impressive all around. And, one thing that I always kind of, getting married wasn't even, on my radar, not remotely at least. And I was all combat, all military. That's all I'm thinking. I was like, married. I mean, I'm not thinking about that. But even if I was to think, when a couple of times my mother was just kind of approaching me about it, and I said, where do you think I'll find someone that agrees with what I've been doing, how busy I am, I'm going into the army, but yet you want her to be somewhat from our culture, and I'm like completely now on, I don't want to say Americanized, but I'm like beyond being what they call moderate, right? Like I'm a hybrid version of both cultures, that's what I like to call it. But I'm probably more on, I'm open-minded. That's what my dad, how he raised us. And, I pick what I like from each culture and make my own lifestyle. And I didn't think I'll find somebody that will at least, accept my lifestyle right away. But life works, it's magic. And she was at Redstone Arsenal. We had mutual friends who lived in LA, and she told me that, hey, there's a family there. I was like, I'm not looking for making any friendships. She didn't even mention anything about her. She just said there's a family there. I used to go to Nashville just to get some Iraqi food here and there, and she was like, why would you drive to Nashville? This Iraqi family there, they're really good people. I'm telling you, they're like your mindset. Go hang out with them and eat some Iraqi food. And I kept resisting, and then I think around December, around the holidays of 2009, when I went and met them, and I met her, and then a few months later, obviously, I ship off to basic training. We got married right before basic.
Oh, that was quick.
Very quick, yeah, very quick, because I
don't have time to mess around.
Well, not just that, but I really had no hope or faith that I will find someone that will be as moderate as I am. And her mindset as driven, fit into my lifestyle quickly. And I mean, it doesn't really, I didn't feel like I needed years to figure it out.
Wow.
I committed, and 14 years now, we're going into 15, never looked back. Best decision, ever made. So I married her right before I went to basic, and then I went to Fort Jackson, AIT, at Fort Lee, and then we got stationed at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, right after that.
Roughed it. Nice.
Wow. Well, I know Damon alluded to it, but it was during AIT. Captain McEwen at the time, he was a general's aide for the TRADOC G3 general, and Fort Lee being a training facility, and he was going back and forth. And I remember being still AIT students, and my platoon sergeant and first sergeant, called me up, and I go to their office, and they're like, hey, tomorrow we're going to this building or whatever. That's all they told me. And they like, put on your best uniform and all of that and be here at this time. That's all I need. And naturally what we think at young Joes and AIT are like, I did something wrong. I'm in trouble, But again, I think, not skipping basic and the experience. By then I had already been around, ranks and military customs and all that.
Yeah.
There wasn't much that will phase me. The only thing that, I'm always professional. I'm always in respect to customs and courtesies. They never felt that I saw anything beneath me. So whether it's the parade rest, the attention, all of it to the day, it's in my core. So I was like, yeah, Roger, you don't have to tell me twice. I'll be here at the right time, right place, right uniform. Showed up next morning. They take us to this building, and I'm sitting fancy building where, the garrison, not trade doc related people work. And I'm sitting outside in the lobby with my platoon sergeant. I asked him, and he's like, I have no idea, man. I'm just like you, and I don't know who we're meeting, but they told me to bring you here. And so then comes out of the door, McEwen, Captain McEwen at the time, Sean, comes out. And I naturally, man, I haven't seen him since I left Iraq. I jumped up and we hugged each other like,
brothers.
Oh my God, man. I hugged him, and it was a very emotional moment. And my platoon sergeant looked at and is like, what is this dude doing with this captain, right now? But that, again, it goes back to what I was telling you. That's what makes it worth for me, seeing them again, hugging them. Mm-hmm. Sean started my paperwork and been with all of this, like Damon and Jimmy and Doc and everybody. So anyways, I see Sean, and he was like, I said, well, this is a great surprise. He's like, hey, the CG or, my general is going to come out here in a few minutes. He's going to ask you where you want to go. And I'm telling you, all I knew is Fort Hood. Just listening to them and talking to them in the months and years before, all I knew is either Fort Hood or Fort Riley, because of, that's only two places. So I told him, and he's like, do you know where you want to go? And I told Sean, I said, Fort Hood. I want to go to Texas. And he's like, you're an idiot. Why would you want to go there? You got to pick something different. I'm bringing you a general out here. He's going to ask you, you better pick something. I was like, well, I have no idea where to go. So he asked my platoon sergeant, he's like, hey, can you help him out? Like, talk to him about different places and maybe he'll make up his mind. Platoon sergeant was like confused, like, why does he have to sit here?
Right.
And then it wasn't much time. A few minutes later, the general comes out. Sean introduced me. We take some pictures. And then he was like, so Sean told me that you got married before basic. You're getting ready to receive your orders. And, where do you think you want to go? And I didn't have an answer. So I just told him, I was like, sir, I have no idea. Honestly, all I know is Fort Hood. And then Sean, jokes about it. And he's like, sir, I'll let you know later. We'll talk. And, to the day, I really do think my first duty station was probably, influenced by that conversation between Sean, and I would think it was, at least. And it was definitely nice, to be out there. But I'm a person who likes to get in the car and drive and long, road trips with the family. And that island fever hit me very quick,
fever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So
being
you're so big, right?
But yeah, both kids were born there in Hawaii, Triplet Army Medical Center. And we started the family there and loved it. And then moved back to the U.S. 3 years later.
And what was your duty assignment then?
That assignment there. So I was with the Sustainment Brigade. I was a part of the CSSB Combat Support Sustainment Battalion in Hawaii, Schofield Barracks.
And then when you came back to the States?
Oh, to the U.S., that's when I transitioned back to the medical side. So I wanted to, by then, I got my citizenship at AIT, and, I had the options of going different routes and whatnot, and commission or staying enlisted. But I loved being an NCO to the day. I mean, obviously I'm on the dark side now, but I loved being an NCO. I enjoyed it. Didn't really think about commissioning.
So you made it to E5, E6?
I made it to E5 by the time I left Hawaii. And then here in Texas, I was picked for E6. The same month I was picked for direct commissioning, I was picked for E6. And I remember my battalion S1, he was like, hey, what do you want to do? Pin on the E6 and delay the commission or commission. I was like, well, I mean, I don't think it will make a difference at this point. So let's just go the commission route. But yeah, so I switched to the medical field because, again, I wanted to go back to my education and what I wanted to do. I learned that there's always room, whether you're medical, quartermaster, infantry, whatever you do, into having your perspective influencing others and helping them. And I did that throughout. You ask anybody who worked with me, it doesn't matter what my specialty was. I was always talking to my squads and my platoons that I had. They get caught up with a little bit of paperwork, arguments, or whatever, and I'll pull them back and add a little bit of perspective and light to, that's how I leverage my story. Really, not to highlight me; it's really to give them perspective and also prepare them. That's, I think, one of our challenges in combat is that we had a lot of young men and women go to combat for their first time, and you can't blame them for reacting a certain way, being in such a hostile foreign environment to them.
Yeah.
But those actions and impulsive reactions also caused us lives and made enemies for us. So the more we could do, even not me, but the ones who deployed before, the more we could do and shed light and perspective to them before they deploy, the better and stronger they were. And that's the duty that kept me driven every day. Sure, the technical skills and what I was doing every day, that's implied task, right? But what's beyond that? How am I helping my soldiers? That's why the MOS became, I don't want to say irrelevant to me. My bigger duty was to help anybody who's about to go overseas. And if they need me, I'm going, So I kept doing that, but I wanted to go back to the medical side. And I picked my new MOS was the cardiovascular specialist. It was 68 November. So I got sent to San Antonio, did about a year and a half of training, and then I joined the reserve afterwards.
You're a busy man. You're a busy man.
Stayed busy, yes, for sure.
So so you have 2 kids now.
2 kids, yes, daughter and son.
Boy
Yeah,
and a
my
girl.
daughter. My daughter is 13. Her name is Miriam, and my son is Yusuf, which is the Arabic spelling of Joseph, and he's 11. So both were born in Hawaii. Our first pet, she's still with us. She's a German Shepherd. We got her in Hawaii. Her name is Kona. She's still with us, old and barely walking. And the other German Shepherd we got a couple of years ago. 2 kids, 2 German Shepherds.
2 kids, 2 German Shepherds, a wife,
Yes.
a career.
Yeah.
Iraq right now. What's the big win here with all the sacrifice, with your personal sacrifice, from a family level, from a community level? You usually ask this question, did we win?
Right.
So I'll ask that question, but from the lens of an Iraqi citizen, did we win?
So that's the $1 million question everybody asked me. And I think the other question people like, how did you feel about fighting your people? And again, that usually doesn't come from someone who's been to combat, because if you've been to combat, we didn't fight a citizenship, quote unquote. We didn't fight Iraqis. We didn't fight Jordanians. We fought an enemy. And if you care, it doesn't matter what their citizenship is. I'll be happy to take them out, right? I don't care who they are. If you believe in that evil act, if you believe in that, whatever descriptor you can, I'm loss of word for how to describe that enemy. But if you believe and support that, I don't care what's your citizenship. So when people ask me, how did you feel about going back and fighting your people? I was like, I didn't fight my people. I protected my people, the innocent Iraqis, right? I fought anybody who were believing in Al-Qaeda and their mindset. Because that's not the religion I grew up with. The Bin Laden version of Islam is different than the actual thing, right? And I'm not, a big fan of, talking about specifically religion or anything, but I know for a fact the different version that we were raised with before all of that ideology came about. And so anyways, I was like, no, I didn't fight my people. So that's one. 2, I think when people were asking those questions is relevant. If you ask me this question or ask anybody from Iraq in 2007, people will be like, no, we didn't win. There were no random V-beds in the streets before 2003. I can go on and on about the things that, as bad as they were before, we talked about the economy, financially people weren't, good, and Saddam was brutal and all of that. But there was a clear path. If you stay on that path, not mess with him, go work and come back, you will live at least. And there is no bigger prize than just being alive around your loved ones. Yeah. Now, fast forward past 2003, you had nothing to do with politics. You had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda or either side. And you could die just by being at the wrong place, wrong time. So that's different, right? So you ask people around that time, if we won, people will tell you 100% no. Now, the misconception that we as Americans had is that we expected victory sooner than later. We expected that culture. We always say it takes generations for different reasons, right? But we take that phrase for granted. For something that big, that big of a change at that scale, it literally does have to take generations for people to shift their mindset. Yeah. So who do you have to wait for? You have to wait for the kids or the babies that were born early 2000s to become adults, to experience what we offered them, what we opened their eyes to, what we brought to the country, so they can reap the results of that, right? And say, okay, this is the benefit of the internet. This is the benefit of being open to the world. This is the benefit of me going to Europe and study abroad and gaining a master's degree or, completing master's degree and coming back to Iraq to make my society better. And this is bigger thing. This is the way we can protest things. It doesn't have to be with AK-47s, right? Yeah. So those principles that we believed in 2003, 2000, all the way until really 2010, 11, you weren't seeing results. And people in the U.S. society and even us as service members, we were struggling to make sense out of it. We kept saying, oh, this will never change, right? So it's not true. We just rushed it. We expected the results sooner than we should be. So that's one. Last thing I would say as far as Iraq. Now you ask me, and yes, we are winning. We won, I think, obviously with sacrifice and big price that we paid from both sides. Iraq gave millions of innocent people. People weren't even involved in working for the police, the army, believing one side or another. They were just trying to survive while they were caught in the middle. And Iraq became a battlefield for a lot of countries that really, quote unquote, they were our allies in the months leading up to 2003 and quickly turned the other way. So anyways, that country, that society gave up a lot. Now you ask them, the newer generations, people who were the young kids that were born early 2000s, now they are the adults that are leading that society. They're the ones that are going to universities and protesting the right way and really living the freedom that we talked about, right? So now you see the change. Now you see the results. And now is definitely the answer to the question is like, yes, we won. We showed them their pathways and what they can do.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Like the short-term victory versus long-term, right?
Yeah.
What about the young American that's watching right now? What advice do you have to give them with regard to like leadership in life? And I think it's one of those, like the young American, or it could be a young Iraqi that's sitting here watching, right?
Absolutely.
Like what golden nugget of information would you like to try to communicate to them that if they're wanting to be a leader, whether it's military or in the civilian world, what piece of advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm a leadership, I guess, how do you say it? I mean, I'm just all about leadership. I love leadership. Here in the U.S., and instead of going back and studying veterinarian, I went and got masters and focus on leadership, and that's just what I enjoyed. My civilian job as a reservist, my civilian job probably would have called for an MBA, but I was like, oh, sure, I can go get an MBA, but that's just a resume accolade. What I really wanted to enjoy, and I told my wife when I started that master's degree in leadership, I told her, I said, I have never felt this satisfaction in learning something as much as this is. I think I have, counting the Iraqi degree, I have total of 4 different degrees, or 5, I think, counting an associate degree here in the U.S. But that leadership study and the master's degree that I got is what satisfied me the most. So anyways, I say that to tell you how much I invest in leadership and how much I care about connecting with people. So the biggest nugget I would give to people about leadership is that humility goes a long way. And if you lead with the humility, you understand that we're all people at the end of the day. And you remove all these barriers and all these other differences between us, whether it's politics, religion, whatever. At the end of the day, we live life equally, depends on your beliefs and what you want to do. Sure, you can get caught up with it. But while we're here, there's always something bigger and better than what we think is the biggest thing in our lives, right?
Yeah.
If my car is broke that morning and I feel like this is the end of the world, guess what? Somebody doesn't even have a car. And mind you, maybe they don't even have money to get on the bus. So I can go on and on. So having perspective and not taking things for granted in our society here in the US, again, not take things for granted is the one phrase that I can always say to any young adult that here in the US. And that I was telling you before we started is that I'll freely and comfortably tell you how as a leader in our army, our retention, our recruiting efforts, it's a worrisome right now. And I think our leaders in the army, all the way up to the general officers, they share the same concern. Is that, and again, it's because of the change in different generations, right? So I really, really hope that all of us, we carry this duty with us, whether we're in the service or outside, and continue to engage people proactively. Don't wait for people to ask you to go speak at the middle school. On Veterans Day, it's not for us to go enjoy the celebration and glorifying us. That's not what it is. It's setting up the example and preparing them, because the next enemy we fight is different, right? And there's always a different enemy. There's always different battle, different, what's old is the new. Large-scale combat operation is more relevant now than in the coin era, right? So again, it's on us. The one nugget I would give is that there's always a bigger cause in life to serve others. There is no better goal than serving others. You may not have to serve and go be infantry. I don't care. Go be a doctor in the army. There's always room to serve. There are people that deploy and never leave the wire, not to demean that role or minimize it, but their role, nobody can do anything without our HR professionals, right? And S1, because you're getting paid there. Supply, the army can't move without you can go on and on. We all collectively better. So if you're not trying to squeeze that trigger, sure, there's men and women that are able to do that. Go do something else. And beyond that, learn the intangibles, quote unquote, of leadership, learning discipline, learning how to be coachable, be open-minded. Otherwise, you walk around this life entitled, taking things for granted because you just woke up, while there are others that are even within this country that are struggling. Then you're just disconnected from reality, and you're not going to be a leader. You just can't do it. So we can, again, go on and on about this, but there's always a bigger cause in life, in uniform or out, to do it.
In uniform or out.
Yeah.
Last question, and then we're going to wrap this debrief. What does it mean to be an American? Being a beacon of light, I think, easiest way to show it, to talk about it. I think also, I guess it depends on who you talk with here in our society in the US. Obviously, everybody's definition is different. The way I see it, coming from different background, being part of the society, serving in the army and all of that, just selfless service. It's one of our army values. But you look at our history and what we've done, in the world, over and over. Again, if you allow the politics and other considerations get in your head, sure, you can go and argue with us about every conflict that we were involved with. But we're soldiers. And when we go overseas, we're there to protect the innocent. We're there for the bigger cause. I don't care what Senator so-and-so said or whatever. I have a uniform on. I'm there to protect the innocent. And I read this quote recently. I can't remember verbatim, but basically it says character is shown not by how many powerful people you impress, but by how many people with lack power that you help and empower. So it's not about how you impress your senator or your general or your commanding officer. It's about
how many people who doesn't have power that you're helping along the way. So that's selflessness, right? Being selfless. So being American is that to me, being open-minded, being willing to receive others. It doesn't matter. Like the diversity here is what I loved when I first moved to the US. The diversity that you can literally go to different cities within the same state and feel like you're in different countries. That's beautiful.
Right.
You know, Iraq is like that. A lot of people don't see it because they see what happened. But Iraq is the origin of all religions. Iraq is the origin of all civilizations. We had Assyrians, Chaldeans, Catholic, Jewish, Muslims. Everybody lived there, way before, centuries before Saddam or even modern life existed.
Right.
But then as, man start taking control over, the power there, things change, shift and all that. So the beauty of our country here, again, you can pick and choose the path you want or the city you live in and the beliefs and create your own echo chamber, if you will, where you're only surrounding yourself with the people that support your narrative. But there's also always life bigger than that. And, I learned this in a practicality in my deployment in 2021. I deployed as the XO for a surgical team to the Middle East, to Syria specifically. And we were attached with, and that was a great experience. Considering everything that I've gone through, that experience was unique because I took on, now I'm in a different role. I'm not linguist, I'm an XO. And we had soldiers with us that have never crossed the borders of the US. This is their first exposure, junior soldiers and officers. And I had to instill that in them, saying that, hey, don't get caught up with who we're working with, whether it's, Syrian army or groups or we liberating this versus that. Don't get caught up with that. You're a surgical team. You're here to treat someone who's needing your help to save their lives. And there's a Geneva Convention for a reason that we believe in it. The enemy may not, but we do, right? Yeah. So we're here to support primarily our primary task. We're assigned to the Special Forces teams, the ODA teams. That's our primary task. And we save casualties, we save people lives. So focus on that. And that makes it bigger than any politics agenda. So that helped. My previous experience helped me with that. And that was gratifying to me to have that influence on my team during the deployment. And we came back, very successful deployment, and came back stronger than ever with that team. So yes, going back to our young adults here, there's always something bigger than you in life. There's always bigger challenge and people that are struggling somewhere else. So don't take anything for granted. Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure, man.
Thank you.
It has. It's, definitely a different approach from the other debriefs, but this is definitely a very important part of the story that a lot of people don't know about.
Right.
But they will. And, talking about inspiring people, that's part of this mission is to, one, capture the history.
Yeah.
Sit there and talk about it, because I think as we talk, we're going to gain more understanding. Yeah. And I think your view is going to help a lot of the other soldiers that were over there look at it from a completely different lens right now.
Agree.
So I wholeheartly appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.
Making a trip up to Fort Hood. You finally made it here. Good job.
Yeah.
And man, just incredible story, man.
Thank you.
And I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Bobby. I want to close with that. It just, again, like I said about Team Alamo, I mean, your acts now continuing to be dedicated to this cause, to share that perspective. It's what drives me, right? It's what drives me to share the perspective. There are thousands of us, with all respect to that, just retire and turn around and live your life, and that's okay because you've done enough. But you chose to continue carrying the legacy of those who were with us during that deployment and other deployments, and we owe it to them, to their families, and that's our duty. If that doesn't drive you, I don't know what. If the duty to help others who are coming after us to serve doesn't drive you, I don't know what drives you. You don't have to be in the service. You could have gotten out a year later. I don't care. You know what it is like. Go help a young adult, young American, prepare them for the next fight so they're not a weak target. And the last thing I would say is, again, like I told you earlier, you, Team Alamo, your ACT, and everyone that I served with thus far is the examples of true Americans that inspires other nations, not just here in the U.S. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you involving me in this, and I hope this is helpful to someone is listening to it.
Undoubtedly, it will be helpful, man.
Thank you,
Yep.
Bobby.
All right, brother.
Appreciate you.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, man.